Good afternoon, everybody. This is the afternoon session of the Portland City Council on Wednesday, May 10th, 2017. I'm going to shorten my script. Everybody, please respect everybody else. Name for the record. If you come up to testify, please no interruptions or disruptions. If you disrupt testimony or council deliberations, I'll have to ask you to stop. And if I have to ask you twice, you're probably going to be asked to leave. And if you don't leave after you've been asked, you're probably subject to arrest for trespassing. Nobody wants that, so let's all just behave. We had 3 items that have time sensitivity to them that we did not complete this morning, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Carla, could you please call the roll?
Fish.
Here.
Saltzman. Udaley.
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here, and I believe Commissioner Saltzman will be here. His stuff is all here. First item, 474, please call it.
Accept bid of Duke Construction and Excavation LLC for the Argay Park Tennis Court Improvements Project for $581,193.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, everybody, for your patience in coming back after the lunch break and waiting all morning. I'm going to introduce Lauren. No, actually, I'm not going to introduce this. I'm just going to say, please carry on.
Hello, Mayor Wheeler and members of council. My name is Lauren McGuire. I'm the Parks Development Program Manager for Portland Parks and Recreation. With me is Larry Platt from Procurement and Joel Hutchinson, the Project Manager for the park we're talking about. We're here today to accept a bid from Duke Construction for the Argay Park Tennis Court Project for $581,192. Argay Park is located at Northeast 141st Avenue and Failing Street. The project is part of the 2014 bond program that was generously passed by voters who approved the $68 million bond measure to address critical park needs without increasing tax rates. The bond funding that goes towards parks' urgent needs includes repair in failing playgrounds, trails and bridges, pools, facilities to protect workers, Pioneer Courthouse Square, accessibility improvements, restroom improvements, and other urgent safety improvements. This particular project falls into the restroom and other category, which is to fix and replace restroom and other urgent repairs, such as our tennis courts. So here's the 4 Argay tennis court image. We're here talking about the tennis courts and the improvements that we're going to do to those tennis courts. The tennis courts improvements include replacing the tennis court subgrade and playing surface, replacing the lighting, fencing, and net stanchions and player benches. And we're also going to remove more than 30 invasive holly trees, which obstruct sightline from the street and support undesirable behavior in the park. And we're going to be replacing that with a landscape design that follows the principles of crime prevention through environmental design. We're also going to be removing some of the accessibility barriers by constructing new ADA-compliant pathways to the tennis court and installing new ADA-compliant drinking fountains near the tennis court. The 2014 bond funding will be paying for all these improvements. These original courts were constructed in 1974, more than 40 years ago, and they're now in pretty poor condition and not really playable. To show you a little more detail of the improvements that are happening, the slide illustrates some of the ways we'll be addressing them. The red rectangle shows the tennis courts. The blue circle shows where the holly trees are being removed and replaced with new deciduous trees in a different arrangement. And the yellow rectangle shows pathway improvements being made to increase accessibility to the tennis courts. The purple dot here shows the location of the new ADA-compliant drinking fountain. The timeline for the Argay Park Tennis Courts improvements is as follows. The design and construction drawings have been completed with the assistance of Harper Hoff, Peterson, and Regalis, and we've also talked to the Argay Neighborhood Association. Permit drawings have been approved by the Bureau of Development Services, and now we're here requesting council approval to accept the bid for construction. We anticipate this will start this summer, and we hope to finish it this year. Some of the projects in the bond going forward are listed here. You can see the projects under construction and the upcoming construction as well. So Larry, would you like to take it from here?
Good afternoon, I'm Larry Palat from Procurement Services. You have before you the procurement report recommending a contract award to Duke Construction and Excavation for the Argay Park Tennis Court project. The engineer's estimate on this project was $500,000 with a confidence level of medium. On March 23, 2017, 3 bids were received, and Duke Construction is the low bidder at $581,192.73, which is 16.24% over the estimate. Portland Parks and Recreation conducted a bid analysis and determined that the bid items came in higher due to the current labor, primarily due to the current labor demand in the commercial construction market. The city put forward an aspirational goal for disadvantaged minority women and emerging small business subcontractor and supplier utilization at 20% of the hard construction costs. Duke Construction identified 4 divisions of work for the DMW ESB participation, with subcontracting participation at 27.4%, with work being performed in concrete, paving, landscaping, and fencing. Duke Construction and Excavation is a state-certified emerging small business, so the combined prime and subcontracting participation on this project is 73%, which is very good.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have 2 questions. What's the surface of the tennis court?
Bill? would you like to
It's
talk?
8 inches of aggregate base and then 3 inches of asphalt, and there's an acrylic top surface.
So what would you compare that to within our system?
I'm not sure I understand the question, what I compare
So
it
we
to.
have different kinds of tennis courts in our system. What would be an example of another tennis court that has a similar set of specifications?
Berkeley Tennis Court in southeast Portland is the court that we modeled this one after.
And this says you're also replacing the lighting.
Yes.
So I'm just curious, what are the hours of operation with the lights?
The lights operate from dusk until 10 p.m.
Till 10 p.m. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
And those tennis courts in Berkeley, that's the Alex Ravello tennis courts, right?
I'm sorry?
That's the Alex Ravello tennis courts in
Yes.
Berkeley
Right.
Park?
Yes, they are.
Berkeley Park, sorry.
That's correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Great. Any further questions? Any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Please call
I
the roll.
move the
Oh,
procurement
sorry.
report.
Yep.
Second.
Motion, Commissioner Fish. Second, Commissioner Fritz. Please call the roll.
Fish,
I'm delighted you're upgrading some tennis courts. Believe it or not, I used to be a pretty good tennis player, but I hung up my racket a long time ago. But these kinds of courts are just another amenity that we offer the public, and I'm glad that the bond was able to fund this. Aye.
Fritz,
Glad to be able to provide this improvements in one of our few parks in East Portland. This is one of the few that was actually eligible for the Fix Our Parks money on account of how it actually has tennis courts, but they're not currently playable. So thank you all for your work. And thank you again to the voters for approving the tax. Aye.
Wheeler,
Thank you for bringing this forward, and the pictures speak 1,000 words. I will vote aye. Commissioner Udaley is here.
Udaley,
Aye.
All right, the contract, the bid is accepted, and next we'll move to item 476, same players, different issue.
That's right, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, it has to be read first.
accept bid of K&E Excavating, Inc. for the Reiki Field Synthetic Turf Replacement Project for $731,585.
Thank you again. So as Carla read, we're here to accept this bid again. Ricky Field is located at 1405 Southwest Vermont Street. And it's part of the 2014 bond again. Again, it's part of the restroom and other category. And as far as the field itself goes, this was one of the oldest fields that we had as well. The slide shows Reekie Field located at Reekie Elementary School, adjacent to Wilson High School. The field is part of Portland Parks and Portland Public Schools Joint Facilities Program, where the property is actually owned by the public schools, and we are the ones owning and maintaining the actual asset. It's the second ever synthetic field that we had in Portland, and this existing field is outdated, unsafe, and not meeting national standards for playability. Portland Parks discontinued issuing permits on this in 2009, and it's still used by Reekie Elementary students for recess and physical ed on a daily basis. The existing field has significant drainage and surrounding issues, and the surrounding sloped area has eroded, causing sediment issues as well. Again, we have severe ADA challenges here that we're trying to address. The project seeks to replace the field in its entirety, and it'll be actually a little bit larger. The goals of the project are to provide a field that's safe for play, that's a durable field that can be used year-round, and that is an accessible field. Field improvements will include removing and responsibly recycling the existing synthetic turf. We'll also regrade the field and the surrounding lawn for accessibility and slope stability. We're going to be installing new field drainage system for stormwater management, and we'll install new industry standard synthetic turf and infill consistent with the city's guidelines. It will be recycled crumb rubber. The field will be lined for soccer and both men's and women's lacrosse as well. We'll be making ADA improvements, installing one ADA accessible van and one standard parking space. We'll be providing an accessible walkway from the main parking area to the field, and we'll be providing an accessible drinking fountain as well. As far as the timing for this project goes, we finished the design and construction with David Evans and Associates. We've talked to the public at 2 open houses in March and in May. Our permit drawings have been issued, and we're here for acceptance of the bid. The project should happen this summer. Again, the projects that we're working on currently in the bond and the upcoming projects. Larry?
Good afternoon again. You have before you the procurement report for recommending a contract to K&E Excavating for the Reiki Field Turf Replacement Project. The engineer's estimate on the project was $969,906, with a moderate confidence level. On March 28, 2017, 2 bids were received, and K&E Excavating is the low bidder at $731,585, approximately 22% under the engineer's estimate. The city put forward an aspirational goal for disadvantaged minority women and emerging small business subcontractor and supplier utilization at 20% of the hard construction cost for this project. K&E Excavating identified 2 divisions of work for DMW ESB opportunities with participation at 5.2%, or $38,345.50, with work being performed in trucking and landscaping. This project is particularly challenged based on the surrounding topographical issues and significant technical expertise required. I will turn this back over to the council now for questions. There is a representative from K&E here if there are specific questions. Thank you.
So I have some
Commissioner
specific
Fish,
questions.
yes, you bet.
Having spent most of my daughter's childhood on this field, I might have lobbied Commissioner Fritz to include this in the bond effort. So a couple questions. You mentioned the challenges with the site and the drainage. The problem with the old field is there was a hill and an incline. And when it rained, it meant that dirt and other debris came down the hill and then came onto the field and degraded the field. And when it rained a lot, the field actually took on water and became unplayable because you'd have several inches of water, and that is not safe for kids to play in. How are you addressing the runoff of water on the incline, and also on how you're addressing drainage of water on the site?
I know that Gary Detka, who's the project manager for this project and couldn't be here right now, I know that he has plans for different kind of grading on the site to address your issue. I don't know the specifics of that, but I can get that answer for you.
Yeah, just, I mean, it's a rare instance where I have personal experience with the 2 problems, the drainage on the hill, and that just brings sediment and dirt and other things onto the field. And second, the field itself, when it rains hard, doesn't drain, the current field, which is probably why you stopped permitting it. So those are, I assume you're addressing both in the design?
Correct, and we have the contractor here, so he
Could I
could
ask
probably
a couple?
address.
Yep.
Yeah.
You've been very patient. I think you've been here all day, so we should give you 2 contracts while you're here. So you're.
My name is Brian Littlefield with K&E Excavating. Maybe to answer your question about the grading, there is a hill, a small little knoll on, I guess, the north side of that field, and that all gets taken away. So that'll help some of the slopage.
Good.
And then,
It'll also help with spectators,
yeah,
put
yeah.
some stands there.
And the field itself has a flat pipe that runs at a 45-degree angle down the center of the field, and that takes all the groundwater into that pipe and takes it out to header pipes around the perimeter of the field. And then that takes it out to a main line, which takes it out to the system.
So that should allow kids to play on the field while it's raining?
Yeah, and it's pretty common on a lot of these fields. We've done some of them with the same design.
And what's the surface you're using on this field?
That is another,
It's field turf, Nike field turf.
Nike Field Turf? So Commissioner Fritz, is that the same surface we used at Buckman?
I'm not familiar with what was done at Buckman.
Well, how was this
It's
selected?
Nike, Portland Parks has an agreement with Nike, and they have a branding agreement with
Right.
Nike for.
So it's
field.
it's their highest specification
Yes.
surface, right?
Yeah,
And
meets
it's- that was-
all of PP&R I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that was certainly an issue of concern for the parents at Reiki, and I know Elizabeth Kennedy Wong and others in our communications team had a lot of backwards and forwards about exactly what kind of turf, including doing a very comprehensive study. Did you want to comment on that at all, Lauren?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit to that. This is post-consumer crumb rubber that we're using in this particular case, but we do have, we have been talking about whether we might be able to even use the EPDM, which is the new synthetic crumb rubber. So we're
From my
looking
point of
at
view,
that.
the Nike product is a very safe and durable product. So I'm a big believer in synthetic because you get more use out of it. So I would defer to you on that. The final question I have is that we've had robust conversations at council before about whether certain fields should or should not be lit. And the virtue of this field is it's surrounded by commercial properties and a school, so that it doesn't have the potentially negative impact on homeowners. I see that this includes provisions for future sports field lighting. The advantage of putting lighting in, of course, is you can almost double the usage of the field. What are the current plans to put lighting in the field?
We don't have this in our bond budget, so we don't have lighting for this particular field.
So Commissioner, is this eligible for SDC investment in lights?
It would be if we had any left, but I think almost all of it has been allocated already.
Well, I just remind everyone, I think I was the third vote on raising the limit on SDC revenues. This is a field I care deeply about, and by putting lights on it, it ensures that the families in that area get about a 50% greater usage without it adversely impacting the surrounding neighbors. So I'm going to vote for this, but I'd also like to work with my colleagues to find the resources for lights.
Well, as you remember, Commissioner, you put the adding of lights to be a conditional use permit, so we'd have to go through that process. We'll look into what we've done at Dunaway Park. Even though there's no lighting there, we have the electrical conduit and other such fittings are underneath the new surfaces, so
Right.
that in the future it would be relatively easy, so we can perhaps look into, I don't know whether that's being done here or we could look into it.
All I would ask is that at some point, someone could get back to me with what a lighting plan would look like and what the cost would be. And then I'll take it up with the commissioner in charge.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any further questions at this point? Brian, thank you in particular for your patience. We appreciate it very much. Is there any public testimony on this item?
No one signed
I'll
up.
entertain a motion.
So moved. I move the report.
Second.
Commissioner Fish moves, Commissioner Fritz seconds. Please call the roll.
Fish,
Thank you, and thank you for being here, sir. Aye.
Udaley,
Aye.
Fritz.
Well, it was very helpful that you did stay and come back, because indeed we had questions that you were the one able to answer them, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the report's accepted. Thank you, and again, thanks for your patience. Next item, 478, please.
Authorized contract with Moss Adams LLP for financial and federal compliance audits of the city and its reporting entities for 3 years and up to 5 years, starting with the statements for fiscal year 2016-17 and other professional services not to exceed $2,976,059.
And speaking of patience, thank you, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Drummond Kahn, the Director of Audit Services in the City Auditor's Office. I'm here today with Fiona Earl, who is a Principal Management Auditor and manages the contract for the audit of the city's financial statements. I know it sounds exciting, but we'll try to keep it very brief. Under Oregon state law and city charter, the city is required to complete an annual audit of the city's financial statements. The audit has to be conducted by a licensed municipal audit firm. As the contract manager, the city auditor's office oversees a contract with an outside firm to conduct this required audit. We're here today to obtain your authorization for a new financial audit contract because the existing contract expires this month. The materials we submitted explain the open and competitive process we use to advertise, collect, and evaluate the bids that we received, and we're happy to field any questions you have about the selection process or about the annual financial statement audit.
Questions? Public testimony? Please call the roll.
No one signed up. Fish?
Aye.
Daly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you. Aye.
Wheeler?
So it was a 2-minute presentation. You waited all day, and Commissioner Fish still yawned. That's probably a good sign.
It was quality time. It was-
Thank you for bringing this. The ordinance is adopted. We are now adjourning the meeting of the Portland City Council. We are now reconvening as the Portland Development Commission Budget Committee on Wednesday, May 10th afternoon session. As members of the Budget Committee, we've all received copies of the budget on Tuesday, May 2nd. I'd now request that the council clerk call the roll. Thanks, Susan.
I'm sorry, what are we voting on?
It's the budget for the PDC. Please call the roll.
Fish?
We're voting,
No, we're not voting, we're just,
You're the Portland Development Commission Budget Committee today, so we're accepting the budget.
we're saying here rather than voting, right?
Yes, we're saying here, this is not a vote, sorry, Commissioner. It's roll call.
Roll call. Fish?
thank you. Thank you.
Saltzman?
Thank, here, yes.
You Daly?
I'll do what I'm told, I'm just trying to get the clear instructions.
Here. Fritz?
It's very challenging to be on stage all morning and then come right back and to figure out what's going on. It's harder than it might look, although we appreciate everybody's help on this. Here.
Wheeler?
Here.
Thank you.
I now request that the Portland Development Commission present the budget message. I have a few initial remarks prior. Few things promote progress in our community better than well-paying jobs. I'm committed to bringing living wage jobs to Portland and matching Portlanders with those opportunities. New jobs are certainly coming our way, but not all jobs are created equal. We need jobs that support middle-class families, not just lower-wage work. Through the work that the Portland Development Commission will be doing moving forward, I support their focus on shared prosperity for all Portlanders. PDC is innovating to support entrepreneurs as well as bringing economic vitality to neighborhoods through the Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative that my colleagues and I have heard much favorable information about. The PDC budget we're considering today reflects nearly a year of work engaging the community. I want to thank the PDC staff, stakeholders, board, and city leaders in developing a budget that will allow the PDC to advance its mission to create economic growth and, importantly, opportunity for Portland. That mission has been shaped by the current reality that while our economy demonstrates business and employment growth, its benefits still aren't reaching all Portlanders. To align its communication and engagement, PDC's board is today adopting a new communication strategy that recommends a new name for the agency, and I endorse that needed step to demonstrate the agency's commitment to building an equitable economy. Together, we'll use our resources and talent to deliver growth and opportunities for all Portland residents. I now request that the Portland Development Commission present the budget message. Chair Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners. I'd also like to thank the many people involved in the preparation of this budget. It is truly a community and collaborative effort. As we move into the third year of our strategic plan.
And Tom, I'm sorry, I should have said everybody needs to identify themselves for the record. I apologize for the interruption.
Tom Kelly, Chair of the Portland Development Commission.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry about that. I know better. As we move into the third year of our strategic plan, PDC continues to focus its work to address Portland's ongoing challenge to be a place that offers opportunity and economic growth to all of its residents. Our general fund request prioritizes resources essential to implement the strategic plan's focus on inclusive economic growth. Thank you, Mayor, for your proposed budget that maintains key citywide economic development functions. The budget also recognizes the importance of implementing strategies and plans we have in place to assist key areas of the city, including North-Northeast Community Development Initiative and action plans and Gateway, Lance, Old Town, Chinatown, as well as the 45% set aside for affordable housing. Over the next 5 years, PDC's budget and forecast will recognize the need to generate new revenues and resources to sustain the agency's ability to deliver on its mission to create economic growth and opportunity for Portland. Currently in draft form, the new plan will ensure PDC optimizes public benefits and financial returns. Later this afternoon, as the mayor mentioned, the PDC board will take up the proposed adoption of a new communications strategy and brand for the agency. I am proud of the strategy and look forward to the agency's continued contributions to make Portland a city we can be proud of. On a personal note, I think this will be my last time before you as the chair of the Portland Development Commission, and I just want to say that, first of all, I believe that the state of the PDC is strong, and I'm proud of where I'll be leaving it. And I want to thank all of you. I've enjoyed working with the City Commission and in collaboration, and I think it's a great example of good government in our city.
Thank you, Chair.
I'll turn it over to Kimberly.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. I'm Kimberly Branham, Executive Director of the Portland Development Commission. So good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. I just want to echo or publicly state my appreciation to the chair for his service. I've had an opportunity to see how much time he puts into this and how much heart he puts into this work, and his wise counsel is going to be missed, so we appreciate his leadership. So I'm pleased to be here today. I'm joined by Lisa Abwaf, who's our Development and Investment Director, and Tony Barnes, who is our ever-capable budget officer and responsible for what Lisa and I are going to explain. So we're pleased to be here to talk about the fiscal year 17-18 proposed budget. I'm going to provide some context and give a high-level overview of the fiscal year 17-18 budget within the framework of our strategic plan and our long-term future. And then Lisa will provide an overview URA by urban renewal area by urban renewal area. And then I'll close out with a sneak peek at our new brand. So as illustrated during the March 21st budget work session, we align our budget and 5-year forecast with the 4 objectives of the strategic plan. Today, because we have already shared with you in depth our general fund and other non-TIF resources, we will be particularly focused on the healthy, complete neighborhood area of focus, which is 99% supported by tax increment finance, which are resources that support capital improvements, but will also touch on equitable wealth creation and access to employment. PDC's total estimated resources are $342 million for the next fiscal year. Approximately half of the resources available is cash on hand, represented by the beginning fund balance from prior bond sales and tax increment land sales and other program income. About 1/3 of the resources will be from new tax increment resources, mainly in Interstate, Lents, River District, and North Macadam urban renewal area. Consistent with prior years, the general fund resources represent about 2% of planned resources. So while on May 17th, you'll take action on to approve and consider the 17-18 budget, we've included in the budget documents received a 5-year forecast so that you can see the plans for the urban renewal areas. Because they are largely capital, they can be, they can really differ year to year, and so a 5-year look can show better sometimes our priorities. Over that period, in total, there will be almost $660 million in expenditures. That's both for the Portland Housing Bureau and the Portland Development Commission. The majority of expenditures over the next 5 years will be related to property development, notably in Lenstown Center, Old Town Chinatown, and Gateway Action Plan. As seen by the housing expenditure, total close to $200 million over the next 5 years will be expended. Much of that is front-loaded in this year in interstate urban renewal area, North Macadam and Lentz. Economic development funding is available through general funds, CDBG, and E-zone resources. We've been conservative in our forecast because of the anticipation of a reduction in community development block grant dollars from the federal government. PDC works, I'm going to change mics. Excuse me, I think I'm going in and out. I'll try this one. PDC works closely with our colleagues at the Portland Housing Bureau, and I see that Kurt is here, so if there are any questions about priorities there, he is available to answer those. To program the timing of the housing set-aside. Looking from fiscal year 15-16, which was the beginning of the revised policy, the TIF lift, through the completion of all urban renewal areas, we are on track to spend approximately $281 million, or 45% in new TIF resources, as well as the remaining $20 million from the closeout districts. Taking into account the last 2 years and the proposed 17-18 budget, we are largely spending ahead with regard to affordable housing, with the exception of the Central East Side and the Gateway urban renewal areas. So as we look at our investments, we're heartened to see that much of our impact has achieved desired outcomes, from recruiting more than 2,000 quality jobs and achieving a 10-to-1 leverage ratio. However, we also have room for improvement, with MWESB DBE participation just meeting the policy objective of 20%. With our loan and grant tools, we've begun to update our products and tools with the new strategic plan focus. So for example, we have a Prosperity, you can go through all of it, Prosperity Investment Program, which is a consolidation of our storefront improvement plan and our development opportunity services. And it also now allows for internal tenant improvements. Nearly 70% of the resources today, since we launched that program in September, identify as people of color. As part of our business plan work over the last year, PDC, in conjunction with the Office of Debt Management, has been refining estimates for the city general fund taxes returned from URA defeasance. So what you see here is an illustration between fiscal year 17-18 and fiscal year 2034-35. And you'll see some key inflection points when, for example, in 2021, the Airport Way and Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative districts will pay off, and so resources will be returned to the city, county, and state school fund resources. What you see in front of you represents the portion that is anticipated to come back to City Council, to the City of Portland. In 24-25, the downtown waterfront, South Park Block, Central East Side, and River District are set to defease, and then there will be another increase in 25-26 with the closeout of the Interstate and Oregon Convention Center urban renewal areas. This takes you through the Lentz, the end of the Lentz District, Gateway, and North Macadam in 2032-33. So the blue line illustrates total estimated return taxes, about $380 million during this period. And then the red line takes into account compression, discounts, and delinquencies. So it's effectively a more conservative assessment of what would be returned to the tax rolls. The green line illustrates the funding that PDC has been carrying in one of the models for the long-term business plan. And we realize that this is not yet a conversation we have brought to you in a work session. We plan to do that over the summer. So this is for illustrative purposes, but we wanted to make sure, as there were conversations about the return of resources to City Council, that you had this kind of order of magnitude look.
Kimberly, is your projection of return of resources net of any properties that we may assign to you to develop? Is this just a cash flow issue?
Yeah, this is just cash flow. So this is not our asset management. These are just resources that are returned.
So it doesn't presuppose we've changed your business model in any way.
Yeah.
This is just the cash flow.
Right. This is almost from your perspective as stewards of public resources for the city of Portland. What could you anticipate returning to your coffers? So with what you have in this graph is a representation of the long-term business plan model. So you see in the darkest blue, existing resources. So these are tax increment finance resources, community development block grant dollars, general fund resources. And then you see that there's a portion where we identify new public resources. So that's where we would ideally like to see an increase in general fund or some other source of resources. That's effectively our gap at this point. But then we also have an area which we are calling mission-related investments and then program-related investments. And so those are the potential returns that were we to invest as we are showing in our budget and be able to have to really optimize both public benefits and financial return of our TIF assets, we could secure significant resources to help offset our operations costs. What you'll see is that by 2026, TIF funds supporting PDC's operating budget will be eliminated, and so the remaining resources in that bottom level are general fund, community development, block grants, and others. You can go to the next slide. So as we begin to implement the business plan, we are thus beginning to talk more about how planned investments fit into the investment categories, which are crucial to the business plan assumptions. Looking at our 5-year expenditure plan through the investment category lens, so this is different from business lines that we talk about in our budget. The 3 primary categories are infrastructure and grants. So we anticipate investing about 26% of our resources in grants and infrastructure and not expecting that we would get any financial return. Approximately 34% or just over $100 million in program-related investments. So these are investments where we would anticipate a below-market rate of return, a higher public benefit, but a return of capital. And then finally, mission-related investments that maintain key public benefits, but are expected to provide a market rate of return, so somewhere between 4 to 6%. It's worth noting that this graph does not include the housing expenditures. If we were to put housing back in, housing would represent just over 37% of total expenditures at about $185 million during this time period. All right, so looking at the 9 urban renewal areas, this is meant to not to look at in detail, but just to see that each urban renewal area has a different makeup in terms of what portion is focused on grants and infrastructure, what portion is focused on program-related investments, and then what portion is focused on mission-related investments. So in the top line, you have our neighborhood urban renewal areas. We are not anticipating doing any mission-related investments. These are, we'll anticipate below market returns and grants and infrastructures. North Macadam is heavily infrastructure, grant, and program related in the next 5 years. So at the bottom line, the River District, the Central East Side, and the Oregon Convention Center are heavily programmed to mission-related investments. So these are both markets, because they're in the central city, where we know the market can absorb that, but also where a lot of the primary public benefits have already been achieved. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, but I'm happy to answer any questions now, or Lisa can go through the urban renewal areas.
Go ahead.
Okay.
You're good to go. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa.
No problem. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Lisa Roth with the Portland Development Commission, and I'm the Interim Director of Development and Investment, and we're going to walk through slides urban renewal area by urban renewal area, but you'll note, for the purposes of folks who are trying to see the smaller versions of the allocation between different kinds of investments, we have an expanded version by urban renewal area here. So starting with Interstate, the North-Northeast Community Development Initiative that came before Council in January guides our investments of about $32 million of new investment over the next 5 years, and then we had approximately $10 million of existing commitments also within the urban renewal area. The Community Development Initiative prioritized 5 areas of investment, which are what is listed here. We're including about $5 million of investment in property ownership and redevelopment, together with business ownership and growth, that really touch upon the wealth creation goals that Kimberly showed at the beginning of the presentation, and that's over the next fiscal year. We also are introducing a new middle-income housing opportunity investment, which complements the district's sizable set-aside. We're anticipating an allocation of $2.4 million next fiscal year towards that program, which would expand the Housing Bureau's home ownership and home repair programs to a broader community, so kind of a broader set of income levels that is currently available via the Housing Bureau. And finally, what you'll see in the budget is we are anticipating investment in the Alberta Commons project that you'll see in the next fiscal year, and that is going to help make tenant improvements and provide affordable commercial space to local, small, minority-owned businesses as part of the Natural Grocers project.
Can you hold this slide for a second?
Sure.
So the last time we had a hearing on this, we heard from a number of community members, including representatives of home ownership nonprofits, that they thought we should put more money into home ownership and change the mix. And when the mayor prepared his budget, it was difficult to figure out where this issue gets resolved. And so what have we done in light of that testimony and in terms of changing the mix?
Well, let me see if Kurt's still here. I think Kurt might be able to speak to it from the affordable housing standpoint.
Kurt, you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, absolutely.
And-
Actually, we have a one-on-one briefing with you, I think, in a week to specifically talk about the flow of funds. It's interesting that when the Housing Bureau did its NOFA for this spring, we made available not just a site for home ownership at 5020 North Interstate, which was purchased with TIF, but also capital dollars for that site. And additional home ownership resources. And it's, I think, important to mention that not all the resources were applied for. We did, with the mayor's decision, identify Proud Ground as the entity for which we are giving an exclusive right to negotiate for the development of the 5020 North Interstate site. And we have allocated funds to Habitat for Humanity for home ownership, but there's actually still money available. So what we've prepared is a summary sheet of all the resources that we have put forward, both directly and indirectly, including mortgage credit certificates, a program you will recall that we administer in the region, and down payment assistance. So I have a much more robust spreadsheet that describes that to you, and we'd be happy to share it with the full council.
You know, maybe it's just me, but these things are hard. It's very hard to hear off these new mics. And there's an echo and a chamber, and we're going to have to revisit the technology. Kurt, without going into any more details, and thank you for that summary, based on the testimony that we heard at that hearing, have we modified the split? The amount of resources we're allocating to affordable home ownership, or are we retaining the committee recommended?
The advocates asked for 50% of the TIF lift, and we've not abided that request. What we have done is we've identified the entire flow of funds, which actually gets us significantly in that direction. Because I think they were specifically looking at down payment assistance without looking at the other kinds of resources like mortgage credit certificates.
And so I look forward to the briefing. I guess I generally am biased towards investing in affordable housing that for people shut out of the market. We heard from a number of people, including community members, they wanted to see low barrier home ownership in that district. So I'll look forward to seeing the plan you have for meeting the apparent demand.
I would like to say parenthetically that down payment assistance works if you have product in the pipeline under $400,000. And the challenge in the northeast corridor, especially Albina proper, is the dearth of product. So we actually have qualified home buyers who have been granted down payment assistance and they cannot physically find the units. So we're shifting more to the direct provision of hard units to then couple up with the down payment assistance.
Thank you.
So we'll next move to Gateway. The Gateway URA is actually set to expire in June 2022, and we, similar to the North-Northeast area, have an action plan of priorities identified by the community in 2016, which focuses on creating a vibrant mixed-use regional center through investment in 3 key geographies. One is the Halsey-Weidler couplet, which they prioritized above all, the transit center, and then in what is called Central Gateway. The majority of PDC's investment in the area, based on community feedback, is focused along the Halsey-Weidler Business District, and we're administering those funds through our loan and grant products. So as you look at the budget, you'll see it in our commercial property redevelopment loan, our business lending, and our grant products, and those are all targeted at really helping with small business development along Halsey-Weidler. A significant kind of set-aside of our loan resources of approximately $4.7 million is focused on partnering with the Housing Bureau and Human Solutions to realize a new mixed-use, mixed-income housing project at 106th and Halsey. And we're particularly looking at an investment in new space to provide for small businesses or retailers at that location. Finally, we're working closely with PBOT on joint street improvement investments to support and complement the small business investments that PDC is making. And we're excited that in the next couple of months, a national entity called People for Bikes is actually going out to Gateway to tour both the infrastructure improvements as well as the business development activities that we've been undertaking. So moving next to Lents. Lents, more like Old Town Chinatown, is actually kind of midway to the back end of an action plan that helps guide our investments. And the most sizable action plan investments currently, of approximately $19 million, is towards the completion of the 4 Lents Town Center projects of Oliver Station, 9101, Asian Health Services, and the Woody Guthrie project. And you'll see that investment reflected in our commercial property lending line item. In addition, our activities are focused on business development and growth, particularly at the town center as we bring on new commercial space in the ground floor of the housing projects. And then also along Southeast Foster, we have approximately $2 million in business lending and prosperity investment program grants. And finally, I'd also call attention to, we have $1.9 million, which we're investing in Leach Botanical Gardens, and that matches another $5 million from the Parks Bureau. Next slide. So moving into the central city, our investments in downtown waterfront are almost exclusively focused on Old Town Chinatown. It has an action plan that was approved by council in 2014. And the majority of our investments are anticipated to support historic and seismic renovation of the historic buildings in that area, as well as to provide replacement parking to both the historic buildings and new development that the district has long aspired towards as the district sees its surface lots redevelop. We have available about $14 million in next fiscal year and $27 million over 5 years for that historic preservation district parking that's related both to the preservation as well as new private development. And finally, I would just showcase kind of in the lower left in terms of pictures, we have about $400,000 annually that we administer through our business finance items and our grant products that focus on entrepreneurship and business support in the district. And that's resulted in projects like the preservation and tenanting of the Overlook building with a local company named Movell. Moving to River District. The River District budget is sizable, and you'll see it's kind of well allocated between different outcome goals, but it's predominantly allocated to 3 major project activities. First, the Old Town Chinatown Action Plan actually overlaps between Downtown Waterfront and River District. And so our commitment in Old Town Chinatown spans both of those urban renewal areas. And so our focus similarly, our investments is to focus on historic and cultural preservation, spurring new private investment and development, and encouraging business growth within the neighborhood. Second, we have approximately $1 million dedicated to the Broadway corridor area or the post office kind of location over the next year. And this really covers 2 major activities. It covers work to get the master plan underway for the Broadway corridor and the post office site, as well as completing a feasibility analysis that we've been conducting for the past couple of years for Union Station. And that investment for Union Station is approximately $800,000 of the million, and it's part of a 5-year federal grant that we're providing a match for. And the goal of that by the end of this calendar year is to have identified kind of major track and building improvements to allow the station to continue for another 100 years. And then I would note, as you look at our budget and you do look at the future fiscal years, you'll see the major reinvestments of infrastructure resources into the Broadway corridor area happening within the next 5 fiscal years. And lastly, we have approximately $10 million allocated for Centennial Mills in this current fiscal year, and we do anticipate, based on council action, that we will have about $5 to $6 million of that remaining to administer into redevelopment of that site into next fiscal year. So we do anticipate some of that will roll over.
Can I ask a question of you, Tom, as the chair? We've been all at one time or another pitched on the idea of using Veterans Memorial Coliseum as a rail station, that if there were ever to be high-speed rail that linking the West Coast. I'm struck by the fact that, you know, Amtrak has to cross the Steel Bridge and come into Union Station, which begs the question, is Union Station the right place for a train station? And if you were king for a day and money wasn't an object, would you renovate Union Station for some other purpose like they did in Denver and move our rail capacity across the river?
Since I hadn't put any thought into that at all until you asked me the question, I would say off the cuff, yes. I think that might be a better use if I were king for a day.
I think, you know, having done a Randy Miller trip to Denver and seeing how they renovated their Union Station as a hub for many things, but then they moved the rail and bus somewhere else. And we're looking at a feasibility for the station, and we're also looking about maybe relocating the bus station. It seems like, Kimberly, is that part of the bigger thinking about whether it is the right location?
It is. The grant work that Lisa and her team are leading is really going to come at a good time for the rest of the work that we're doing with Broadway Corridor. So we'll have a sense of order of magnitude in order to get it to a place where you could actually have a more active use. Right now, there are estimates of almost $100 million, and so we really need to get that number and have additional clarity in order to be able to dream, to have aspirations such as the one you're talking about.
I love having the rail at Union Station. I would not like it to go on the other side. I think it.
Commissioner, I thought if we were going to spend $100 million, I'd rather spend it at Veterans Memorial Coliseum, upgrade and save the building, and use the ground floor for rail, if that was in the cards.
So the one caveat I'll add to that is the $100 million looks at just the rail at Union Station. It doesn't look at all of the infrastructure investment that would need to happen to relocate all of both kind of Amtrak's facilities as well as PTRR's facilities over to the east side. So it certainly would be a vision. It would just, it would be a sizable investment.
But you know, if we ever, the mayor in his State of the City address talked about Dr. Toulon's vision of burying I-5. I mean, if you're going to bury I-5, why couldn't you bury if you're going to spend, if money's no object.
It is.
You know, why wouldn't you bury the trains as well on the west side?
Can't think of why not.
Oh, boy.
Speaking of, so we're going to move to the east side for a moment. So moving to the Central East Side, we continue to prioritize our investments in the Central East Side Industrial District towards growing accessible jobs and preserving and supporting affordable industrial options. And these investments are really reflected in 3 budget line items. First, we have a strategic sites line item of about $1.5 million that is targeted towards sites like the ODOT blocks or other properties along the Milwaukee Light Rail alignment. Second, we have about $1 million annually via our business and commercial property lending programs, where we see a lot of activity in this particular urban renewal area with businesses growing. And finally, we have about $450,000 annually via our Prosperity Investment Program, which has supported companies like Salt and Straw, who's developing their new facility in the Central East Side, together with PDC's larger E-zone investment. So coming back kind of to the other side of the innovation quadrant, looking at North Macadam. As Kimberly mentioned, our anticipated investments in North Macadam, both over the next fiscal year, but over the next 5 fiscal years, are heavily invested towards infrastructure. Our investments focus both in South Waterfront as well as the Portland State University area. Our major investment for 17-18 that is underway is about $1.2 million for bond, which has also come before council, and that's part of a larger about $5 million investment by PDC for the extension of Southwest Bond in conjunction with OHSU's growth, and that complements the Transportation Bureau's SDC investment. The majority of the non-set-aside investments that are currently committed via ZEER ZMPSU development agreements. We would caveat that we anticipate that both of those development agreements will come under amendment over the next 6 months to a year, and that will likely change the timing of their projects and the generation of tax increment, and thus change the timing of PDC's investment. And lastly, as we speak about PSU's development agreement, PDC's contribution of land value, you'll see in both the South Park blocks and the North Macadam urban renewal area, and that's the contribution to the joint PSU, Oregon Health Science University, Portland Community College, and the city project at 4th and Montgomery. Our contribution in the Lloyd Center is predominantly for the next fiscal year, this fiscal year into next fiscal year, in the Convention Center Hotel via an investment in the garage to support the hotel. Again, that's actually currently in this fiscal year, but we do anticipate it rolling over based on the hotel timing. Good news is we've heard groundbreaking for the hotel is anticipated in late summer of this year. Development of the hotel was one of the main objectives of the urban renewal area, so it's great to kind of see it come to fruition at the end of the life of this district, and it will bring tremendous economic activity to the city and the region. What you do see, and kind of as we look forward and the garage gets completed, is TriMet's contribution, which is anticipated to occur in 17-18, comes back into the district and comes available again for redistribution, whether that's at Northeast Broadway or in the Rose Quarter. And that's reflected in what we're calling the project development line item, so that it leaves flexibility for the community to weigh in on how we spend those resources.
Is PDC going to keep the parking garage?
Yes. And then finally, just to note, because it was an active conversation over the past year with the Transportation Bureau, we have a contribution of about $2 million in some of our forecast years as matching funds to the Transportation Bureau's Sullivan's Crossing Bridge project.
Is there any impact with regard to the proposed transportation budget in Salem? Is this contingent upon any of that, or is this separate from that?
This is separate.
And so I would assume that's a leveraging impact if that goes forth.
Yep.
Okay, very good, thank you.
So finally, going to the 6 Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative districts, 5 years in, we're truly pleased to see significant momentum within each district and some identification of major projects. So for example, the Cully Boulevard Alliance is investing $211,000 into Living Cully Plaza. The J District has earmarked approximately $200,000 for the Roots to Rise Cultural Center. And our 42nd has also acquired property for tenanting by local diverse businesses with a mixture of tax increment revenue and the Community Opportunity Fund. So now a look to the future. So in just a few minutes, we will be headed over to our board and presenting a new communication and engagement strategy that's really designed to align our words and actions more closely with the agency's strategic direction. Working with consultants who gathered information from stakeholders, partners, and the general public, we've developed a strategy that helps distill the strategic plan into an easier to digest framework. That of building an equitable economy. That means growing family wage jobs, advancing opportunities for prosperity, collaborating with partners for an equitable city, and creating vibrant neighborhoods and communities. And because we are committed to doing this work and continuing to fundamentally change as an organization, I'm excited to share that we are going to be Prosper Portland, building an equitable economy. Dun, 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 the grand reveal. So to prosper means to flourish, to succeed, to thrive, and to do well. We really want Portland to prosper, especially communities of color and those that have been historically underserved. The new logo represents a keystone, so you have 5 keystones, which is a key part of the bridge between the public and the private sector, between different communities. There are 5 keystones representing the 5 quadrants, and it also happens to align nicely with the 5 portions of our strategic plan. So we look forward to living into this new era and are happy to take any questions that you might have.
Very good. Questions for Director Branham?
Just a couple, please. And
Please,
I think
Commissioner
you have to
Fish.
be somewhere, you mentioned, so
Yeah,
we should be brief. First of all, the mayor has proposed a budget note and funding which would give the Film and Video Office a 1-year reprieve with
Right.
one-time general fund money.
Yes.
And he's directing the City Budget Office to work with PDC to consider alternatives.
Yes.
And as the arts liaison, I will be engaged in that and I have some thoughts. And
Great.
am looking also to you to think about where is the synergy? Where is it? Where is the best
Okay.
fit? And what are options for a more sustainable funding stream?
Okay.
But I appreciate that the mayor took that off the chop block for this year. And with 2 of our major productions leaving Portland, this is a year we want to be showcasing, that concierge service as we hope to land a successor to Grimm and a successor to Portlandia.
Absolutely.
We've been getting a lot of testimony recently, Kimberly, about some mixed-use development in Gateway with education partners and housing. Is that still high concept, or do you have anything to update us on?
I'll turn to Lisa, but I believe that we're at the master planning phase. This is the Ted Gilbert project, yeah.
We have been having active conversations around the same. What our understanding is, having kind of looked at that area for a while, is some of the zoning and some of the street plan doesn't necessarily encourage development because it aspired to higher density development than the market will bear. And so the early work that we're doing is we've convened all of the Bureau partners to assess kind of what works and what doesn't work in code and regulation today to encourage development, and holding ongoing conversations with the property owners who are interested in developing. The one thing, Gateway has a really limited budget. So as we look at 106th and Halsey, as well as future opportunities, just making sure that we're balancing our investments between those 2.
Okay, so at this point, you're looking at creating the platform for having the discussion. And the final question I have, Kimberly, is for you. I've served under 4 mayors, and each mayor came in with a lot of enthusiasm about crafting a vision for the Rose Quarter. And at some point, we'll have a whole storage area filled with Rose Quarter visions. And partly, I've learned, is that we have to be careful about not trying to get ahead of the market. At some point, the market is going to tell us that the Rose Quarter is viable. But but it's hard to jumpstart that. And we're seeing in other parts of the city where the market, ignited development. And so I guess the question I have, particularly with the expenditure of the monies we've budgeted in this URA, at some point, should we rethink how we approach the Rose Quarter, including rethink the legal, structure that we impose in hopes over, a 20-year period to actually develop and implement a vision?
So I guess I would answer that by starting with what I think was a really strong public process that was led to create the Northeast Quadrant as part of the Central City 2035 plan, and established, I think, a shared framework for that area. If ODOT is successful in securing resources to help deliver on some of that with the alignment in that area, I think we will send signals to the market that it is a better time to invest. So I don't know that they're mutually exclusive, but I agree with you that I'm not sure the time is ripe today, particularly with competing areas like the Central East Side, South Waterfront, and even the Broadway corridor.
And just as an aside, I mean, I've had developers suggest that because it's a unique part of the city, what we need is like a battery park authority, or we need a different kind of legal structure with a role for PDC. And I don't know the answer to it, other than, it is a unique entertainment district, and I'm not sure anyone's really figured out how to activate it, and yet we've got the pieces. And I hope over time you come to us with ideas for how to do that.
Yeah, we're looking forward to engage in that conversation.
Thank you.
Any further questions for this panel? Thank you. Excellent presentation, very thorough and obviously well-received. And Director Branham and Chair Kelly, I want to applaud you. Chair Kelly, this may be your last time. I don't know. Maybe we'll have you back. But I want to thank you for your leadership. You've done a phenomenal job. I would even argue that it was a transformative period over which you were the chair of the PDC Commission. And you not only have led some of the work that's brought us to the conversation we had today, you were obviously instrumental in helping us transition leadership in the Portland Development Commission to Director Branham. Director Branham, I want to applaud you for pushing very hard, very publicly, and very consistently for equity. And this new rebranding of the agency is really the last step that you have taken towards an agency transformation where all of the agency is focused on answering the question that you have put out at every public meeting I've been to, where you've said, you've raised the question, who benefits? And now you have an agency to ensure that all Portlanders who are impacted by growth have the opportunity to participate in the benefits of that growth. So I applaud you and wish you well. So at this point, the meeting of the PDC Budget Committee is continued till tomorrow, Wednesday, May 11th at 6 p.m. here in the Portland City Council chambers in Portland City Hall, where we will hear public testimony on the budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good. We are now reconvened again as the Portland City Council, and we have a hearing. So let me get my right talking points.
Recessed the first time, so we're good.
80, 480.
We need a roll call again, do we?
I feel like we should have different outfits for each, role we're playing.
Mustafa.
Thank God this is on the schedule for the 2 hours.
I lost it. Where did I put my? Here it is. Knew I had it. Okay. Very good. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll start off with legal counsel making an announcement about today's hearing.
So first, we're going to let Carla read the item. I-
Very good.
I-
Let's wait till she gets back to her desk.
I could, but
No,
it'd
we'll
be
wait.
odd.
There's not much we can do until she gets the PowerPoint working anyway. This is why her job is secure. She's the only one who can make that thing work. You didn't miss anything. It's just the part where we try to get the PowerPoint to work. Oh, great. Awesome. Thank you. So Carla, if you could read the item, please, 480.
Okay. Item 480, appeal of TMT Development Company, Inc. against the Portland Design Commission's design review decision of approval with conditions in the West End sub-area of the downtown sub-district of Central City Plan District at 901 through 919 Southwest Taylor Street, LU 16265-061 DZM.
All right, thank you. And now we can get to the attorney giving us some procedural information.
All right. This is an on-the-record hearing today. This means you must limit your testimony to materials and issues in the record. We'll begin with a staff report by Bureau of Development Services for approximately 10 minutes. Following the staff report, the City Council will hear from interested persons in the following order. The appellant will go first and have 10 minutes to present their case. Following the appellant, persons who support the appeal will go next, and each person will have 3 minutes to speak to council. Following that, the principal opponent will address council and rebut appellant's presentation. If there is no principal opponent, council will move directly to testimony from persons who oppose the appeal. After principal opponent, council will hear from persons who oppose the appeal, and each will have 3 minutes. Finally, the appellant will have 5 minutes to rebut the presentation of the opponents to the appeal. Council may then close the hearing, deliberate, and take a vote on the appeal. If it is a tentative vote, council will set a future date for adoption of findings and a final vote. If council takes a final vote today, that concludes the matter before council. There are several guidelines for those who will be addressing council today. First, the evidentiary record is closed. Again, it's on the record. The hearing is to decide only if the body below made the correct decision based on the evidence that was presented. This means you must limit your remarks to arguments based on the record compiled below. You may refer to evidence that was previously submitted. You may not submit new evidence today that was not submitted before. If your argument includes new evidence or issues, you may be interrupted and reminded that you must limit your testimony to the record. The council will not consider the new information, and it will be rejected in the city council's final decision. Second, if you believe a person who addresses council today improperly presents new evidence or presents a legal argument relying on evidence not in the record, you may object to that argument. Finally, under state law, only issues that were raised here may be raised below may be raised in this appeal to City Council. If you believe another person has raised issues today that were not raised below at the Design Commission, you may object to the council's consideration of that issue. Additionally, if the applicant fails to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with enough specificity to allow the council to respond, the applicant will be precluded from bringing an action for damages in circuit court. And that concludes my remarks.
Very good. Do any members of the council wish to declare a conflict of interest? I'd like to declare a potential conflict of interest. I have taken campaign contributions in the past from TMT Development. I don't know if that qualifies, but I'd like clarity on that.
Does not qualify.
A potential conflict of interest is an action that you could take in your official capacity that could or would be to your personal benefit. I don't think a past campaign contribution would fall into that. And I
No.
think there may be some exemptions. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit on the spot without my ethics code in front of me, but there may be some
Well,
exceptions.
feel free to excuse me at any time if you think it's warranted.
I think you're on the hook. I think you have
Very
to
good.
participate.
Any other
Can I
commissioners?
just comment on that? That's the first time anybody, in my recollection when I've been on the council, has stated that. And I think it's a nice piece of clarity and transparency, whether it's a conflict of interest or not. I appreciate you saying so.
Very good.
I think it's a disclosure. I think we should be careful not to use conflict of interest in a all too generic way. I appreciate the mayor disclosing it. It doesn't constitute, in my judgment, a conflict of interest. And there's nothing that precludes us, I think the council will tell us, from over-disclosing. But that does not establish that he has a personal financial interest in the outcome.
Very good. Unfortunately, it sounds like I don't get excused from this afternoon's
try.
hearing. It was a good try on my part.
Might have worked for jury duty, Mayor, but it's not going to work here.
There you go. So no members of the council have a actual conflict of interest. Do any of the members of the city council have ex parte contacts to declare or information gathered outside of this hearing to disclose?
Mayor, I don't have any ex parte on this, but I do walk by the building all the time on my way to work. So technically, I'm aware of the site.
Very good. Would you agree, city attorney, that does not constitute an ex parte contact?
It actually does constitute an ex parte contact, but you just disclosed it on the record. So if people on a regular basis are familiar with the site, then yes, you would just say that on the record.
Interesting. I am also familiar with the site. Very good.
Well, Mayor, in fact, sometimes members of the public that come to these proceedings are surprised that we are so quick to profess complete ignorance about the underlying issue as a way of staying on the side of not having an ex parte contact. But, so like we're not allowed to take trips to the sites and inspect without disclosing it. This is a hard-to-miss building, so.
Yes. Okay,
I
good.
was just going to say that no doubt, I have walked past this multiple times and I cannot remember having taken any particular note, so.
Very good.
No offense.
No offense.
Okay, so this is more interesting than I thought it would be. I sold this short right off the bat. Does anyone present in the council chambers wish to ask either Commissioners Fish or myself or any others about ex parte contacts or information that has been disclosed? Seeing none, have any members of the council made any visits to the site involved in this matter? And I think some of us have already said we've walked by it. Does anybody here want to ask us about that? Doesn't look like it. Do the council members have any other matters that need to be discussed before we begin the formal hearing? Seeing none, we'll now start with the staff report, and as legal counsel indicated, that's approximately 10 minutes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Thanks for having us. I'm Tanya Paglia from BDS, and
I'm Hillary Adam, BDS, as an assistant.
Okay, so we're up. Okay, so this is an appeal of the Design Commission decision for the studio building and the Guild Theater located on Southwest Taylor Street. The presentation will have 5 parts: context, proposal, process, decision, and appeal. So the first part is about context. The studio building and Guild Theater together occupy approximately 1/4 block and are located in the West End sub-area of the downtown subdistrict in the Central City Plan. Because the site lies within these districts, the approval criteria for design review are the Central City Fundamental Design Guidelines. The studio building and connected Guild Theater are located along the South Park blocks and face onto Director Park. The site is in a highly trafficked and visible location, a block from the Central Library and close to Pioneer Courthouse Square, the Cultural District, and the MAX. The buildings are located on a 10,000 square foot site with frontages on Southwest Taylor and also Southwest 9th to the east. And this view is from the east, looking west across Southwest 9th. It shows the studio building, which is identified by the red arrow, and to its right is the Guild Theater. The 2 connected buildings were built in 1927 by the Ellison White Conservatory, an institution for the study of music and dramatic art. They were designed by architect Luther Lee Dugan, and they feature 3-dimensional busts of Chopin, Bach, Schubert, Mozart, and panels with composers' names. The buildings are listed on the City of Portland's Historic Resource Inventory, the HRI, but are not listed on the National Historic Register. This view is from the south, looking north along Southwest 9th, just to give you more context. The studio building is a 9-story building, as you can see, with a mansard roof. The adjacent Guild Theater is a 2-story building, and they're interconnected at the ground floor. And another view of the site. This view is from the northeast, looking southwest across Director Park. As you can see, this is a busy pedestrian area at the heart of the city. And another context slide. This is a view from the east, looking west along Southwest Taylor, with Director Park on the right. The site is zoned CXD Central Commercial with design overlay. And moving from context to the proposal itself, the proposal had 3 main elements. The first was to replace windows on the studio building. The second was for storefront alterations to the Guild Theater. And the third was to replace rooftop mechanical and not provide the required screening. And there was a modification request to not provide the screening as part of the review. So the rest of the presentation is only going to focus on the replacement windows part of the project, as the other 2 are not in any kind of contest. So the proposal, the applicant requested design review for replacement of 192 of the studio building's existing steel windows, proposing to replace them with aluminum windows. And for the process, there were 2 design review hearings, and before that, there was a pre-application conference. At the pre-application conference, the applicants got some feedback from staff that these are significant buildings for the city's architectural and cultural fabric, and staff highly recommended pursuing information about possibly listing the buildings. Then on to the design review. That was January 19th, 2017. Staff had come in with a recommendation of approval. The commission rejected the staff report, and they were unanimous that the guidelines C3, respect architectural integrity, and A6, reuse, rehabilitate, and restore buildings, were not met by the proposal. The commission commented that this is a very important historical building for the city and noted that it is one of the biggest buildings in the city with original steel windows, and that the existing steel windows are a character-defining feature of the studio building. They were concerned that the applicant had not thoroughly explored retention of the existing windows or explored replacement with more similar windows. Beyond the change in material from steel to aluminum, the profile of the proposed replacement window differed a great deal from the original windows. The commission noted that the architectural integrity and significance of the existing buildings, which would qualify them for the National Register of Historic Places, could be at stake. The commission thus encouraged the applicant to explore the financial benefits of listing both buildings. The commission advised that the financial benefits of listing the buildings could offset the cost of rehabilitation of the existing windows. The commission asked the applicant to return for a second hearing and to bring in-depth information on alternatives to aluminum replacement windows, to include restoration of existing steel windows and replacement with steel replica windows. Overall, the commission requested that the applicant bring enough information to show that due diligence had been performed. And then the hearing was continued to March 2nd. At that hearing, per the request of the commission, the applicant submitted all the information requested about other replacement window options. The information for replacement windows included 3 models of steel replica windows and 3 models of aluminum windows. And of these, the applicant had a preferred option, which was an aluminum window by the from the Winco 3250 series. And that window had a better matching profile than the window that had been brought to the previous hearing. The staff report recommended approval with conditions intended to avoid a denial. But they were also intended to uphold the commission's direction that retention of steel windows, a character-defining feature of the building, would help meet guidelines. So staff wrote a condition of approval requiring the original windows to be restored, with the understanding that the commission could opt to strike the condition and include their own new condition.
Could I ask a question here, please?
Sure.
And your time obviously gets extended for any time, and this is true for everybody. Your time, we stop the clock
Sure.
for questions. So I just want to make sure I understand what happened on March 2nd.
Sure.
So on March 2nd, a set of windows that was aluminum came before the Design Review Commission, and the Design Review Commission agreed that those aluminum windows were acceptable and met the conditions?
There's a little nuance. I mean, they had an aluminum window the first time, and then the second hearing, March 2nd, they did have an aluminum window, but they also presented other options because they had been asked to present other options. However, they had a preferred option. So in essence, they were just presenting that one aluminum window.
So when you say the decision was approval with conditions, what
Yes.
did they approve?
So, oh yeah, I was going to get to that in the next slide. But no,
Very
but
good.
that, no,
Okay,
happy
thank
to get onto that slide now and not go into too much detail here.
Okay.
So the decision, yes, the addition, so we had recommended an approval of retention of the steel windows, but the commission did not. They struck that condition and they added their own conditions. So the conditions you're seeing here, they were added by the commission to address the guidelines that we've listed, A6, C2, C3, and C5. And the conditions D and E were the new conditions. Of those, the 2 sub-bullets, the 2 last sub-bullets of D are the bullets under contention today, if that makes sense. So
No,
they're
can you,
not.
I'm slow and I've had a long day. So can you say this in idiot speak so I absolutely understand what the point of contention is?
Sure. So based on everything they saw and everything that the commission wanted, they were able to come up with a approval, but in order to have an approval, they needed the windows to be more in line with existing. And so to achieve that, they added these conditions,
The two in bold.
the two in bold.
So glazing,
Yeah, and I'm sorry for so much text.
that's all
here.
right. So the glazing has to have a greater clarity. What does that mean for those of us who are not window
Right.
experts?
That was, so things got very stressful at the end of that hearing.
I can see why.
They wanted the applicant to come back with a glass sample of greater clarity that they could just approve. But the applicant really wanted an up or down vote at that hearing. So they didn't want to wait 2 weeks to come back with a glass sample. So in order to get them out the door with an approval, everyone scrambled with their cell phones to try to find a metric to give to state we need higher clarity. It was hard. It's a hard thing to define without being prepared to do that ahead of time. So in the end, basically what they wanted to say was they wanted greater clarity than what was presented, but of a tint that would allow them to meet their energy code. So you're trying to give them the way that this condition is written. It's a little
So these are
hurly-burly,
tinted
but it's-
windows and they were too dark.
Yes,
Got it.
exactly.
Thank you.
And
I'm
I
there.
definitely will get
Thank
into
you.
that a little bit later. But the traditional old building has perfectly clear windows because they
Got it.
didn't have tinting, and so we wanted a clearer window. So that's how that condition got added on. And then the other thing was to add the muntins and the spacer bars to create a better simulation of a divided light window, which is a condition that happens throughout all our cases with older buildings. So just wanted to say that they reached an agreement, they reached an approval after
Sorry,
a lot
could you
of.
just tell me what a muntin is, please?
Oh, sorry?
What's a muntin?
A muntin is the piece of wood or other material that's between the panes of glass to create those divided lights.
So it's
And
like a
I'm gonna-
lattice.
Yes, and I'm going to show you guys, I think it's my next slide. No, it's not, but I can cut over to that slide if it helps. But just one last thing about the decision, that it was for approval, but we did have some dissenting commissioners, and they felt that guidelines C3 and A6 were not met. So we had a split decision, but 4 out of 6 did vote in favor.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I remember we had a discussion in a similar proceeding about a building within walking distance of this building where the issue was windows. And one of the questions that came up was cost, and another question that came up was the availability of having them manufactured somewhere. Are either of those issues that have been raised in this proceeding, and are either of them relevant to our decision?
Those issues were raised during the discussion of both hearings 1 and 2. They're not approval criteria, so they're always raised in a kind of sideways way.
Right.
But they were factored in. The commissioners asked the applicants to come back from hearing 1 to hearing 2 with all of that type of information. Even though we're not supposed to count it, they asked it to be provided to show that how you could compare these different products and.
Right, and I guess for my purposes, if cost became so prohibitive you couldn't do it, or if you were unable to find someone who could fabricate, I would view that as relevant. Is there a claim here that the cost is either prohibitive or there's not a manufacturer that could manufacture the windows?
In terms of contesting these bullets, or in terms of, so
These two
two bullets, no. Cost, one of the applicants during the course of the hearing said that the spacer bar button issue was not a financial concern.
All right, that's important. And how about?
Not sure about the glazing. Nobody made any statements either way about the glazing, whether there was a financial concern. I think that might be a factor, or it might just be the way it was written.
Well, I
you know.
mean, if someone said that there's no way I can have someone manufacture this window, so as a practical matter, I can't comply, that would be of interest. And as we had in a case years ago, someone talking about cost and practicality, I mean, that would be in the record. But you're saying, at least for purposes of our discussion now, those have not been raised as issues?
I mean, I'm sure that it adds cost. I'm certain it would add cost. I'm not sure about the glass, but the mutton would. But one of the discussion items happened to come across the fact that the applicant said it wasn't a huge cost. It wasn't the main reason they decided not to do it. They had other reasons they decided not to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Those decisions weren't based on cost
So it was
specifically.
a split vote, 4 saying they'd like to see lighter and 2 saying they'd like to see darker? Or they,
Well, interesting, the 2 who dissented didn't want to see an aluminum window at all. So the aluminum window was a very heavy compromise for the commission. They would have liked to see restoration of the steel windows, the character defining feature of the building, or maybe possibly a steel replica.
And
So
then
to even
the-
get
the
to aluminum was,
majority- The majority supported what?
the majority did end up accepting the aluminum window because with discussions with the applicant, they could see that that's what the
Okay, so the
applicant
majority
would be willing
accepted
to
the
do.
proposal, then how did it get here? What happened then?
In accepting it, to get these, these undesirable, from their perspective, undesirable aluminum windows up to snuff, to the high bar that this building, its importance in the city gives, they said it at least has to have these other elements.
That's
If we're
the
going to
muntins and
accept
the
an aluminum
dividers.
window,
Got it.
if we're going to have an
Thank
aluminum
you.
window, it has to be like the best
I see.
case
Thank you.
scenario for that aluminum window. So that's kind of how that ended up in there.
Okay.
I do have one question.
Sure.
So on the all new windows shall feature simulated divided lights with both spacer bars and interior muntins. The option they presented just had exterior muntins, is that correct?
Yes, and I'm going to show you guys how that looks, an example of how it looks, not their exact window, in one of my future slides, if that would help. Should I, or do you have something to say? Okay. Okay, so I will go to the next slide. This is just a quickie. We added a condition about the lot line windows. This is not contested. I just wanted you to see there was that condition in there if you had a question about it. Those windows are no longer allowed by building code as they're on the lot line. So in order to preserve them, they have to do a building code appeal. So it's just an extra precaution to protect the windows was added as a condition of approval. So I didn't want to confuse you by adding that slide, but I just figured you might have questions about it down the road. So now I'm going to just show you guys a little bit about the divided lights, just to get us on the same page in terms of what we're actually talking about. So the top left is a true divided light. That's what you saw in historical buildings when only smaller panes of glass were available. And so that's the historic condition of most old windows. The top middle is that one that we were hoping to have with our condition of approval. It's the simulated divided light with interior and exterior muntins and spacer bars. And then the one to the right from there, the top right, is also a simulated divided light with no spacer bar, but interior and exterior muntins. And the bottom left is just exterior muntin. And then the one on the bottom right is a highly residential application. You wouldn't probably ever see one of those coming through one of our cases. And then I just wanted to narrow it down. These are the two really in question here. The one on the left is what the applicant proposes and prefers, and the one on the right is what is required with our conditions. So just to give you a real visual of what the difference is. This is a wood window, theirs is aluminum, so it's not exactly what the difference is, but it's representative.
So I want to be clear, I understand, because in these two pictures, the one on the left doesn't have the same degree of beveling on the, I don't know if those are muntins or separators.
Those are the buttons, yeah.
So is that a true difference in terms of the two?
That wasn't meant to be part of the story.
So
that was
that's
just
not part of the story. The
yeah,
question is simply.
that's unfortunate that they weren't just the same.
Exterior only versus exterior and interior is the debate.
Right. If this had been a better example, the one on the left would have had the same exterior.
Okay, and so is
Detail.
there a difference in, if I'm standing outside and I'm looking up at the building, do I see any difference?
We would say that you do, and the commission felt that you would. These windows do open, and now that it's getting to be nicer weather, somebody walked by and told me they happened to see like a bunch of windows were open today. So you'll see certainly the interior of open windows, but even the closed windows, you would likely, I think just the whole shadow line and all of the sort of completeness of the window system looks different when you have this complete package.
I have a question. So I understand this property's on our historic inventory, but
Yes.
That doesn't, I mean, if the developers wanted to, they could tear it down, couldn't they?
Yes.
Okay.
That would have to go through design review, right? But
No.
Or no?
they would have to go through a 120-day demolition delay before they could do that.
Yeah. But that's been happening all over the city.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, definitely. This is definitely preferred to that. So this is just a quickie to say that originally staff saw the proposal on the left, and this is all techie, but the circled area is the exterior, interior mutton spacer bar. So their first round of hearing one had that. The second hearing didn't have it. So we originally, when we wrote our approval, had seen the one on the left that had all three of those pieces. But I think actually the applicant didn't mean to submit those, but they came to us that way, so we took them at their face value that they were proposing that. But by the time of the second hearing, they were no longer proposing that. And this is just to give just some perspective, because across all our different cases, big houses, small houses, big buildings, condos, school buildings like the Lincoln Center at PCU, this is just a common thing staff asks for. It doesn't usually come down to a condition of approval. Usually sometime in the process of working with the applicant on their proposal, if they haven't already proposed a spacer bar and muttons, by the time it gets to a decision, they've usually added them. So just wanted to show you this is just a sample of the many buildings that have had this type of replacement window. And just quickly about the glass clarity, it was confusing. They came in with that sample that you can see the sort of the numerical values there, and it would have been easier to compare it with another glass sample to make the final decision, but that wasn't possible. So they took this one and they said, let's just say another one that's clearer and condition around that. So that's how that condition came to be. On the right, you can see how some of the buildings with replacement windows look shiny and green. Glass clarity is part of a traditional historic building, so that was important for the commission, and they wanted to find a way to write a condition for that. So the appeal statement, I'll just leave it up for you guys to look at it. There's 4 different elements of it. It's also in the proposal, or in the notice, I think. Or is it better if I read it? Okay. I'll just let you guys read it.
So just to summarize, in looking at this, there is a claim of cost, there's a claim of procedural error, there's a claim of, I guess, cost benefit. That's what the 4% is. And then I guess the issue that just I could use some clarification on is that the difference between the exterior and interior of the building for purposes of the scope of the Design Commission's review. Is that a legally significant difference?
I can address that.
And I'll go to our responses. I'll let you do that.
I mean, the windows are an element of the exterior envelope of the building, and it is standard practice that we, if interior muttons and spacer bars are not already proposed for buildings of this caliber, we would suggest that the applicant provide that, and if they didn't, it's a fairly common condition on historic buildings. We don't see too many of these through design review, but there have been a few.
In the picture in the top right of this slide, where it shows the windows opening out, is that representative of how these windows open?
Correct. That's
So
that window.
That
yeah.
explains why you said earlier that when the windows are open, and because sometimes we think of windows opening being you slide them up.
Right.
These actually open out so that, in fact, from the sidewalk, you can see both the interior and the exterior of that window.
Correct.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, this slide here is just showing our responses to those different points. I could try to summarize it. I guess I don't want to read you guys to death here. But, so basically, the commission believed that the guidelines would not be met without the conditions. That was response to one of their issues, and that they did feel that the interior, exterior muttons and spacer bars were a standard expectation for the replacement of a divided light window and to maintain the character of the building. The applicant stated that and the applicant stated during the hearing that adding muntins and spacer bars would not be a great expense for the project. And I'm sure they'll speak to that when they come up. That was just something they said. They said their reasoning was because they thought no one was really going to see it from the ground. So they were more motivated by why bother, than money. So that's why we didn't feel too worried about adding the condition, because it wasn't a cost factor per se. The second response is that the commission rejected the entire window sample at the first hearing. So with the procedural question about this didn't come up at the first hearing. Well, at the first hearing, the commission said absolutely no to the entire window, which included the glazing. They didn't focus on the glazing because they just were so dissatisfied with the entire window that was being proposed. Glazing was only a part of that window, and they had so much to discuss that didn't become a discussion item. Once they were trying to actually make the new window proposal, they wanted to make it work, and they wanted to find a way to approve it, so they worked really hard to find what things can we change about this window to make it approvable, and glazing was one of those things they thought that if it were changed, it would become an approvable window. So that was the sort of procedural concern they had, why it came up at the second hearing, not the first. Trying to see what else. And so,
Could I ask a question about
Sure.
the 4% differentiation in the, I think it was in the glazing, if I remember correctly? I can't find it right now. 'Cause-
that was, the slide up. This is their concerns.
Yes, that the conditioned glass only has a clarity 4% greater than the appellant's. Again, I'm no great expert on glass clarity, but 4% seems like a rather small difference.
Right.
I mean, how visible is that?
I can't answer the question of how visible it is, but I can say that, so what happened was they said, this isn't clear enough. We need you to bring something clearer, and
But based on what standard?
that was the,
I mean,
that was,
4%?
right. That was the challenge. They didn't ask for a 4% difference. What they asked for was, bring us the very clearest glass you can bring while still meeting your energy requirements. But this was being done on the fly in a hearing.
I
So everyone was pulling out their phones, trying to say, what would be the clearest glass that would still meet their energy requirements clearer than this glass? And so it came down to, well, everyone knows of this one particular glass, the Starfire, is a little bit clearer, so let's use that as the baseline standard. And so the condition is written to say that they have to bring a clearer glass, or they have to use a clearer glass than what was presented, with a baseline of the Starfire, and hopefully better than the Starfire, but at a minimum, the Starfire. So that's where that 4% kind of came from, is the difference between the Starfire, which was a frame of reference for the commissioners that they'd worked with, versus what was presented to them. Because this was all just that mad scramble of like, bring back a glass sample in 2 weeks, and the applicant saying, no, we want an answer today. So it kind of, we hashed it out. It's an imperfect way to do it, but we really wanted to get them approved and out the door.
The condition is written so that they have some flexibility in terms of that they don't have to use that brand of window, but as long as the clarity is equal to that and greater than
I mean,
what
I'm
was
just trying to
proposed.
see the bigger picture here. I mean, this is
Yeah.
an historic building. It's a great building. It's right in the center of the central city. We've invested heavily in public infrastructure in the immediate vicinity, and the building, though grand she is a tired old dump in need of a lot of attention. And somebody's offering us an opportunity to do that, and we're quibbling over 4% greater clarity. I mean, I'm, as an outsider to this thing, I certainly appreciate where we're trying to go, but this seems really in the weeds.
I understand that. The 4% value came after the hearing when the appeal came in.
Okay.
I think that was the applicant noting that it's a 4% greater clarity. I think across the broad spectrum of the entire facade, that would add up as you're looking into it. Historic buildings have clear glass. Anything darker than clear is going to essentially betray it as a replacement window.
Right, well, and the energy efficiency quotient is also important to me. I mean,
Sure.
it's, separate from this hearing, we've set very aggressive climate goals for the city of Portland, and we've asked developers and builders to actively participate in helping us to achieve those goals. And you know, they didn't worry about that 100 years ago, and now we do.
Mayor, let me just.
That's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Let me offer just a slightly different context for how I'm now going to hear the other evidence, because we're just getting the staff report. The park that faces this building is one of the great public spaces in our city and was built 60-40 private-public resources, and was one of the great acts of generosity of Tom Moyer and Jordan Schnitzer to build this thing. It was deliberately built as hardscrabble, and in a design enhancement that proposed by Zeri Santner, it was built building to building. So the park is extended, so the design includes the street. So the entire plaza could be activated. We all have different aesthetic judgments, and I'm not prejudging this issue, but having invested a lot of my time and life in bringing that park to fruition as the then Parks Commissioner in charge, I will say that perhaps the singular view of that park is facing this historic building. No disrespect to the two modern towers, which are updating our downtown, but there is something magical about the way the park interacts with the Guild, and that I think is also historically significant because the Guild is so identified with Tom Moyer's legacy around film and that building, and the park would not have happened without an extraordinary act of generosity. But again, there is a symbiotic relationship between the two, and they were designed in tandem. And I would just offer that as a perspective as we think about the windows. That's fair.
Great. Any other thoughts, questions? Very thorough staff
I think
report.
Tanya has one last slide
Oh, I
for you.
apologize.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
and I
thank
just want
you.
to say, I pulled up the glazing slide just to show you guys one more time of, what glazing can mean on a building with a lot of windows. It can be very green, very distracting, very reflective compared to what you see in the Guild in that lower left-hand corner, which is all very, very clear glass. So it seems petty, but it is an important element of the building. It's a highly glazed building.
So I had a question about that too, and believe me, I'm not trying to be problematic, but if you look at, what am I looking at? Is that St. Mary's there? I can't tell what, MLC. So you've got MLC up there on the right, and they have fairly dark glazed windows.
those were replacement
and
windows,
you'll
yeah.
notice the blinds are up. And then you look at the historic building with its clear glazing, and the blinds are all closed. And again, that sort of, I know that there have been discussions about this glazing issue before, and whether blinds are what you see from the outside or whether windows are what you see from the outside. So I just want to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, and that's a good question. Honestly, I think the building's been under a lot of turnover. There might have been construction on that floor, because that whole floor had the blinds in a very consistent way, and the rest of the building didn't. So that building's under a lot of transition right now.
Fair.
I don't know if those blinds would always be down on a normal day. So maybe the owners can speak to that.
Very good.
Okay, so you asked to go to my last slide. Okay, so then you have these alternatives that you can deny the appeal and uphold what was already issued. You can deny the appeal and uphold the commission, but also even still monkey around with the the conditions. You can grant the appeal, and you can remove the third and fourth bullets of the condition of approval D, and that would still uphold the decision of approval, or you can continue the hearing.
Very good.
And I think that's it.
Excellent. Very thorough staff report. Thank you. Appreciate it. So next up, the appellant has 10 minutes. And again, you should expect you'll get interrupted with questions, but that doesn't count towards your 10 minutes. And if you could just state your name for the record, please.
Were these glass pieces shown at the hearing?
This one was, and this is showing the 4%.
But this was the one that you're now touching, was that shown at the hearing?
No, because we didn't know that this is part of the condition.
So could I get some clarity as to whether we're allowed to consider that?
Unfortunately, the new sample would be considered new evidence.
Thank you.
But
Then I guess we put away the one. Yeah.
Vanessa Sturgeon, representing the Tired Old Dump.
Can I
VANESSASTURGEON.
interrupt and clarify my remarks there? It's a beautiful old building.
I was
but-
totally joking, Mayor. It's
No,
just, it's,
But the building needs attention. And my point was actually to compliment you.
well, thank you.
And acknowledge that you're trying to make a significant investment in a building that I think most people would acknowledge is worthy of that investment. So I'm actually applauding you and your colleagues for being willing to make an investment in that building, rather than doing, as Commissioner Udaley suggested, which you have the legal right to do after 120 days, which is demolish it.
I was
So-
definitely not suggesting that you do that.
Thank you.
No, and
Thank
I'm
you,
not
Mayor.
suggesting that. So
Making a
I just want
Yes.
to be really clear. I'm complimenting you and thanking you for being willing to go through the process of trying to restore what was an architectural gem. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and you're right, I would agree. It really is in need of significant attention. So, the purpose of the window replacement is that the windows are currently corroding and leaking, and they are composed, unfortunately, of lead. So we are looking to replace them to prolong the life of the building, to stop the leaking, and of course, to improve the energy efficiency. The proposed new window matches the building's original craftsmanship and material quality in style, color, operability, and form. And I will tell you, this has been an incredibly taxing journey for my staff. It has taken us 2 years to get to this point where we have been able to find a satisfactory product to replace these windows. They just aren't manufactured anymore. So, kudos to my staff, Kristen in particular, for doing 2 years' worth of research to find an acceptable option. As you can see, the existing condition of the windows are very poor. The casements are inoperable. Concern over attachment integrity is a euphemism for falling out. Some of them are in with duct tape. And we are concerned about lead dust exposure from peeling and delaminating paint. The 7th, 8th, and 9th floor windows are leaking significantly, and the windows are single pane, which is why you see the blinds closed often, because they leak hot and cold air in and out, and they are, unfortunately, don't do a lot to block noise on the street. So people close their blinds in an effort to mitigate those issues. This is a photo of the existing window and an elevation of the existing window, and the proposed window elevation is included on the far right. We think that it matches the existing windows quite well.
I don't understand, what do you mean by elevation?
An elevation is an architectural rendering drawing. So the difference between a photograph and an elevation are, an actual picture and a rendering. So when we're talking about the differences in these windows, we're talking about widths that are 2/8 of an inch and 1/8 of an inch slimmer than what is existing. The muntin proposed for the exterior will be the exact same size as what is existing. So the only thing at issue today is whether or not those muntins are continued onto the inside of the building. I think it's important to note that we've chosen to move forward with a different window series than was originally proposed to the Design Commission on January 19th. They asked us to come back with a window that more closely matched the measurements of the head, jamb, and sill. And we did that with the Winco 3250 series. There was a $70,000 premium to do so, and we accepted that premium as an improvement to the overall project. It is our position that the proposed window, WinCo 3250, meets the C3 guideline, and the conditions of approval go beyond a reasonable interpretation of the intent of the code. So the first condition was that the glazing for the windows shall have a greater clarity than the sample presented at the March 2nd hearing. And part of the frustration is that we did bring glass samples to the January 19th hearing, and we heard no objection from the Design Review Commission about the clarity of the glass in that first hearing. So what they've proposed, and includes that 4% variation, adds a $57,000 cost premium. The second condition is that the muntins will be added to the inside of the buildings. Now, I'd ask you also to consider that the windows are 16 feet from the ground. So the conjecture that they'll be seen from the street level, I think, is quite a stretch. So again, that adds additional cost to the project that is, at this point, unfortunately, a budget buster for us. We've accepted the additional $70,000 condition. We're working with a bank on the project. It's a $2 million window replacement, and an 11% premium that's being requested here is just puts the project over the line in terms of budget. We don't feel that a 4% greater clarity better meets with the intent of Design Guidelines C3. And, well, we had two glass samples to show you, but it is very, very hard to tell the difference, if you can tell at all, between the conditions that the design review has put on with the glass clarity. Again, those windows are 16 feet off of the ground. So this is a good perspective of how far off the ground these windows are. A south-facing view, the same 16 feet off the ground. Oops. Okay. So our proposed windows respect the original character of the studio building by replicating the exterior muntins on the current windows. And as shown in the visuals from the third and second slides, we've also brought a sample of the muntin with us that is here for you to see in person. The condition of approval does not help us meet the design guidelines of C3. The windows we're proposing in their current state already meet it. It's on this particular appeal, one of the reasons that we had to call for a vote at the end of the second hearing was that we received new direction again at that first hearing with the glass. Then we received more feedback at the second hearing. It took us a month to get back on the calendar for the second hearing, and we need to take advantage of the timing with the good weather coming in the summer, or we will have to wait until next year at the very earliest to do the project. Again, we have financing that is coming through a bank on this project, and the additional $120,000 that's added to the project, or $105,000 rather, puts us over budget in terms of what we have penciled in for the renovation of the building. And it's in the context of an $8 million renovation overall. A lot of that is going into modernizing the mechanical systems, the water, the domestic water lines, which are corroded and in drastic need of attention.
When I had the windows replaced in my house, they did it in November. So what's the problem with doing it over the winter?
It's occupied as a commercial building, so we can do it over the winter, but essentially it involves a wrap, plastic wrap around an entire commercial building. So it's like enveloping the commercial building in a giant condom for the entire winter. It's unsightly, and the poor folks inside will have no view.
Quick, move on.
That's a first.
Some people call that art.
And other people just say there's no view. So at any rate,
Well, I have a question.
yes,
This
Commissioner
is-
Fish, save us.
So so Ms. Sturgeon, let me just, about 2 appeals ago from design review, I think it began to dawn on us that we were going to get more and more appeals of design review processes, in part because of the more frenetic activity in the marketplace, and which is a good sign. But it potentially put us in the position of playing referee on these things on a more regular basis. And we've had prior hearings where we've debated whether it's appropriate to use a roof-type substance as a siding of a building in the inner southeast, and the aesthetic considerations and durability. And we've had other things. And I actually find these fascinating hearings because I find the staff reports interesting. You learn a lot about the history of our city. But I also want to, I don't want us to become the default design review commission. And I'm not sure how we can avoid that because people have a right to bring it here. So I just want to make sure we don't have apparently Restore Oregon has not taken a formal position on this case. So from your point of view, there's a cost component, there's a timing component in terms of wanting to move forward on this project. And so both of those were yes. And the third is that you take a principled view that the design commission purview is limited to the exterior of the window, not the interior. Is that a fair characterization?
That's correct, and I've also, to be quite candid with you, think that part of the reason that we're here is because there was what we feel a significant amount of stepping into the deep, deep minutia of the building, of the design, which seems to me to be outside the purview of what the Design Review Commission is supposed to be tasked with doing.
But wasn't that because they didn't like the aluminum windows at all, and they wanted you to do steel, like the originals?
Say that again, Commissioner.
The reason that these are getting into the minutiae is because they initially denied the application altogether because they wanted you to do steel replacements.
They wanted us to refurbish the steel windows that were already there.
Yeah.
So, and that's impossible.
So the windows that you're proposing now are double pane?
They're double pane.
The aluminum looks sort of like wood on the exterior, so I guess the technology is evolving, so it's right, it's pretty hard to tell.
Does the aluminum look
Well, the
like
exterior
wood?
doesn't look like.
No, the aluminum doesn't look like wood.
No,
It doesn't look like aluminum,
neither
does it?
does the current.
Well, whatever. It looks, to me, with my, maybe I'm just going so blind, I can't tell one way or another. But it's double plane, so it's energy efficient. And what, from your point of view, what is your understanding as to the benefit of that interior spacer bar? That's the part I can't quite figure out. I think I understand the muttons, although every time I say that, I think of someone with a haircut. But what is the aesthetic and functional benefit of the interior spacer bar as you understand it?
Our view is that there is limited to none in terms of benefit, and that's the issue. That's why we don't want to spend the additional $50,000 doing it.
Okay.
So the muntins are already, and spacers are already there on the outside of the windows.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple clarifying questions. You said you'd settled on a different glass product, is that correct?
No.
Oh, what was the additional 60?
To upgrade to the Starfire, the 4%
Right, that's, I mean,
difference.
different
Yes.
from the sample
Yes,
that you brought
exactly.
today.
Right.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the larger
So really
piece
the
of glass
only
is what we
issue-
settled on, this piece right here.
We showed this at the.
Okay. So this is the glass you'll
That's
use?
the glass.
Oh, okay, I see.
That's the Starfire?
No,
Oh,
we can't show the Starfire because
Oh,
it wasn't
right, okay.
presented.
Okay.
It was referenced, but the sample wasn't shown.
So this is a sample of glass you're no longer going to use?
No, this is the glass we'd like to use.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. I thought there'd been a change since
No.
the hearing, okay.
And is this in the record technically?
Yeah.
Could you rotate it this way just for a second?
So if the Starfire is referenced, we can't show it.
Thank you.
Okay.
And if that had a 4% adjustment, it would be arguably just a little lighter?
It's not even discernible. You cannot tell the difference.
Is there a, does it does it naturally reflect any of the colors in the environment on the exterior, or is it just a neutral?
To the naked eye, you can see literally no difference between the two.
Okay.
I feel very torn on this issue. I mean, I care about historic preservation. I love this building. That glass does look dark to me. On the other hand, the first request that you restore the original windows, I don't feel was reasonable, because you've mentioned it's not even possible, but they are like the least energy efficient windows you could probably have. I guess unless you were missing some panes. So I support that upgrade.
So could I just suggest we let them finish their presentation and
Oh,
hear
I
the
thought
rest
they
of
were
the
done. Okay.
testimony?
We're finished, Commissioner.
I-
Correct. Thank you.
There. I mean, not to complicate matters, but I wonder, would it make any, could you do a clear glass on the second floor with the inside muttons to satisfy them, or, I mean, is there a compromise? I mean, looking at the building, there's this the second floor is different than the rest, and it's the closest to the eye. It's 16 feet away.
Well, if I have a second to just ask our architect who's here.
Oh, okay. If he's going to weigh in, he should probably come up to the.
Why don't we do this? We have an opportunity after this presentation for supporters to come
okay.
forward and speak. And so if you don't mind waiting, we'll give you your own 3 minutes. Is that good? Cool.
I'm just looking for a way to balance the aesthetic concerns with the energy efficiency and the cost, which I think are all, each one is an important element.
And Mayor, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Because we have a member of the Design Review Commission here, and I just want to ask, does the Design Review Commission member that's here today intending to testify or just observe? Testify? Okay, so that will be after we hear from the.
Yeah, they get a 15-minute. Okay, so why don't we do this, if we're done with questions for the appellant at this point, why don't we let you take a seat, and thank you for your testimony, and we'll hear from any supporters of the appeal for 3 minutes each. And again, if you could just, thank you very much. If you could just state your name for the record, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and fellow commissioners. I'm Peter Meijer from Peter Meijer Architects, 605 Northeast 21st Avenue, and with me is?
Paula Hoffer with Peter Meijer Architect.
So,
Very good, thank you.
just in way of background of this, we were asked by TMT if we could assist them with this project. Before we even were hired, they asked about the historic status of this property and what their options were. So they put much time into the due diligence on whether or not they elevate this property to a historic status and whether or not that would be of benefit to them as a company. Throughout this project, we continue to have that level of conversation. Unfortunately, the Design Commission made that one of their high points of reviewing these windows. It's my personal belief that we would have had a much easier time in front of the Historic Landmarks Commission with window replacements, because that is a commission body that is used to getting replacement windows. So what the benefit of coming back on the second round is that we propose a much stronger look-alike. These are steel windows, and the replacement window comes very, very, very close, if not identical, to those windows. The question on the table from Commissioner Eduli was whether or not there could be a compromise. We wouldn't recommend that, because you'll see a clarity on the second floor, and all of it, you'll see a difference on the second floor to going. So we would recommend that you stay with the windows as the applicant has proposed. From a historic standpoint, for a consistency from the facade. With the new windows and the new mechanical system and the new balance of the interior environment, it's very unlikely that you'll see these windows open and closed. They also will have to put limiters on the windows so that one doesn't fall out. So those two will limit the amount, if any, at all in the swing seasons that you might see on beautiful days like today. But it's highly unlikely, once everything is completed, that the windows would ever be opened. So I think it is an accurate description to say what we actually view from the exterior. And from the exterior, they're almost, if not identical.
So could I ask a question about that? And so
Absolutely.
I don't understand that they look identical versus don't do something different on the second floor versus the ones above, because you'll see the difference.
Correct me if I didn't hear the request to go to a clearer glass on the second floor.
Yes.
There's visually no difference between the Starfire and what is proposed. But I didn't know if the question was to go to a third type of glass that had an even more clarity. Those third types don't meet energy codes, so you should know what you're requesting in that. So had this been a landmark building, had we gone in front of the land, we would have been able to have the opportunity not to meet energy codes. We don't have that option in this property because it is not a landmark structure. We all love it as a historic building. We all look at it as a contributor to the city of Portland's land, but it technically is not a landmark property. So when I heard clear, I'm thinking it's a third type of glass.
No, I think,
No, that was correct.
Okay.
And I guess the question I would ask, because it may not be a design requirement, but I think of this building in the context of the plaza and the design. In your professional opinion, does the design that is being proposed by the appellant, who obviously you work with, is it harmonized and consistent with the vision of the park?
Absolutely. This is not an uncommon request in today's development world to find reuse for these buildings, keep these buildings alive. Now that you've heard this case, you may see the difference. As professionals, we may see the difference, but the vast majority of people will not see a difference, and so that it will not lose any of that relationship of the building to the plaza. In fact, all the ground floor work that is being done on the Guild Theater will actually enhance that relationship with them. So we don't see any detriment to the park or that whole urban experience with this work.
Thank you.
I don't have anything to add. I was just here for extra questions. I was
All right.
manage the project.
Very good. Are there other supporters of the appeal who would like to testify before? Yes, sir. Come on up and state your name for the record, please.
My name is Robert Pye. I'm with TMT Development as well. Just a couple of quick things. I wanted to clarify what I maybe heard.
Robert, is the green light on in the
Yes,
microphone?
sorry.
Okay, very
Am I
good.
not
Sorry.
close enough? There we go.
Thank you.
Just to make extra clear, extra sure that your question was asked and answered, I think you asked about the extra cost going from the first design review hearing to the second design review hearing. As Vanessa mentioned, that was the $70,000 premium to go to the different model. I think just want to make sure that it didn't get lost in the question about the glass. And then Commissioner Fish, I would say too, on the question about the park, obviously we as neighbors and those that live in the park love it very much and see how much it gets used. I think one thing I would advise we consider too is the position of the studio building in relationship to the park. If you're standing in the park, sort of the nearest point of occupancy in the park related to the studio building is quite a little ways back. You have the Elephant's Deli as well as sort of the stormwater treatment, the overhead canopy of glass. So I think just the perspective of the studio building from the park has some obstructions, if you will. So I think the overall impact that you might see of the studio building, if there was a difference in clarity of glass and things like that, is somewhat minimized, just kind of given where it sits in relationship to the rest of the park. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So is that all the supporters that would like to speak? Very good. Next, the principal opponent has 15 minutes to speak.
I think technically we don't have a principal opponent in this appeal, so just
Very good.
Well, I don't-
Okay,
I think that the
then-
Design
Julie
Commission
Livingston.
isn't,
Wouldn't
we
the
don't
Design
consider the
Commission be
Design
the-
Commission to be an opponent of the appeal, but they certainly can speak as opponents of the appeal, so the typical 3 minutes, but
Okay.
if you need more, Julie, I'm sure they will.
Yeah, if you need more than three.
It's all
I
been very
think-
conversational.
Yeah, I'm sure we can accommodate, and you'll probably get some questions anyway.
So,
If you can
yes.
just state your name for the record.
Good
please.
afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. My name is Julie Livingston. I am here as a volunteer. I'm a member of the Portland Design Commission, and I have prepared some testimony, but I think instead what I will do is just offer a couple of clarifications based on comments and questions that have already surfaced, and then answer your questions. So not in any particular order. I'd like to address Peter's comment that buildings on the HRI should be reviewed by landmarks. I agree with that. This is even though this building is not on the National Register of Historic Places, it and many other buildings in our city are very significant. And regardless of whether or not it is listed, and regardless of whether or not it is in an historic district, this building should be looked at by landmarks. They bring kind of a level of authority to this type of a building that I think Design Commission may not.
So are you suggesting that in lieu of Design Commission or in addition?
In lieu of Design Commission, I think that landmarks should look at buildings on the HRI.
Oh, that's interesting.
Commissioner Udaley, you asked a question about restoration versus replacement. In the first meeting, it was never suggested that restoration of the existing steel windows would be necessary. The majority of commissioners believed that replacement was reasonable. Having a well-functioning office space with energy-efficient windows, this is a great improvement to this building. The building needs some love, and folks were very glad to see that the owner was willing to give it. So there was never, even though we had a lot of discussion about restoration and the difficulty of doing that, it was never suggested that that was the correct path or the only path that the owner should be on. But just as a point, when steel windows are repaired, say a building is on the register, it is possible to install insulated glazing units in steel windows. So for instance, the town storage building on the east side of Portland, which is currently being renovated, that building has it had old wood windows which have been replaced. The new windows have insulated glazing units and they meet energy code. The Fisk Tire Building, which is in the Northwest 13th Avenue Historic District, it's where Cargo used to be located and Room and Board is moving in. Those windows have been steel sash, very similar to the windows in the studio building. They have been renovated and repaired, so it is the original steel sash, and the owner has installed new insulated glazing units. So again, they meet energy code and they are all new. Both of those buildings went through landmarks, not Design Commission, and there was really never, as far as I understand, any discussion about whether or not those windows would meet energy code or if the owner was willing to spend the money to do that work. It just happened as a matter of course, and it was not a condition. Commissioner Fish, you asked about cost and availability. This is commonly available. This work is done on historic buildings frequently. So the Muntins, true divided lights, the interior spacer bars, all of those types of amenities for windows are commonly available. And there is generally a slight uptick in cost on historic buildings because the glass was originally clear. On historic buildings, it's generally a great amount of effort is put into moving towards the clearest glass available. Insulated glazing units have gas in between the panes of glass and coatings on the glass. The Starfire glass itself has less iron in the glass. So it's all of the coatings and the gas that make the energy efficiency happen. The actual glass itself in the Starfire glass, or the equivalent of the Starfire glass, has less iron in it and is less green. So there's a difference in color. There's a difference in clarity, in reflectivity, and in light transmittance. Generally, it's like those four elements.
Can I ask you something, Julie? If you were to rank in significance the two conditions, one above the other, how would you rank them? And this is going to be helpful to my decision-making here. But
yeah, and I am not representing all of the Design Commission when I answer a question like this.
I'm asking you in your opinion.
Yeah. Neither is a perfect outcome. With the spacer bars and the muntins, it is still somewhat obvious that that is not a true divided light. It does a pretty good job of replicating a true divided light. The reason you want the spacer bar in the middle is so that you're not just looking through the glass. If there is no spacer bar, you can tell. It's just absolutely obvious that the window is not a true divided light, so the spacer bar mitigates that. With the color of the glass, with the greener glass, it is absolutely evident that it is a replacement window. A lot of work, the owner put a lot of work into the correct profile. So the windows themselves, the actual metal profile is good. Given the choice between, if you're asking me to make the choice between one or the other, I would generally elect to have something that approximates a true divided light over clearer glass.
Thought you were going to go the other way, but thank you.
You know, I think it's more in keeping with the historic character of the building. Once the quality of the true divided light is absent, you won't get that back. The glass, as people look at the glass, they will realize that, you know, there's new glass here. Most people may not see the difference between a true divided light and the window pattern, the assembly that we've recommended.
Is there anything else that was discussed at either of the hearings that we should be aware of?
You know, I will say that when it came time to vote, Peter mentioned that the owner asked to call the vote. At that time, we understood that both the clear glass and the Muntin assembly was acceptable to the owner.
Excuse me, could you, I'm trying to listen, could you not talk? Thank you.
We understood at that time, when the vote was called for, that both the clear glass and the Muntin assembly, that those were acceptable conditions to the owner. And so the appeal was in fact a surprise to us because there was not contentious discussion around that. So had we known differently at the time, we may have had more or different conversation that would have led to a different outcome.
Say more about that.
Well, I won't project, you know, what type of conversation we might have had, but if it had been clear at the second meeting that the owner was not satisfied with the conditions around clearer glass and the Muntin assembly, we would have had more conversation about that at the time, trying to, you know, get to a different yes answer, or then perhaps maybe even a no vote.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very
So,
much. You were
Mayor,
very thorough. Are there any other? Sorry.
Before Julie leaves, just in the interest of fairness, because we asked the appellant not to show their piece of Starfire glass, there was some testimony that you gave about composition of glass, and I don't know whether that was part of the record before, and if it was not, it's probably appropriate for council to acknowledge it was new evidence and disregard it. So discussion of the iron content and the gas between the panes, if that was not discussed.
Very good.
I'm trying to
It will
make
not
sure we're
influence
fair.
my decision. It probably went over my head anyway.
Very good. Are there any other opponents of the appeal who'd like to speak? Very good. Is there any rebuttal by the appellant that you would care to make? And if so, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I will not need 5 minutes. I'm just going to make one point. I want to underscore what Peter Meijer said, which is that there is virtually no discernible difference between what we have proposed and what the Design Review Commission would like us to do in terms of the conditions. There is, however, a significant cost difference. So I just would ask that you consider that point.
Very good. Thank you.
What, again, what the cost difference is
$105,000
on top of
On top of-
70,000?
No, the $70,000 we already accepted as an additional cost to the project. It's $105,000 on top of a project that's already $2 million.
So what was the 70,000 for?
The $70,000 is an additional change to the frame of the windows that that was made after the first design review hearing that we accepted that request from the Design Review Commission to make that change, and frankly, it was a good suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, colleagues, this is the time where we can have a discussion, or I can accept a motion, or we can decide to keep the record open, or we can close the record.
Mayor, let me, if
May
I
I just
can.
have, actually, I'll
Commissioner
start
Fritz,
something.
then Commissioner Fish.
Could I have staff come back up, please? Was there any discussion at either of the hearings about whether or not the windows would prevent the building potentially getting on the National Historic Register if they weren't done correctly?
Yeah, that, am I on? Sorry. That came up, I think, primarily at the first hearing. The first hearing centered on that a lot, and they say that it's a character-defining feature, and that, yeah, if you remove them, that could have consequences. Do you remember?
Yeah, I
anything
would
more
say that the
detailed than
Design Commission acknowledged that this building, besides having significant architecture, also has a very high level of integrity. And those are two of the things that you are pretty much required to become listed in the National Register. There was concern that the replacement of the windows could jeopardize future listing by either the current or potentially future owner. There are some buildings that they replace the windows and they're listed anyway, and that is totally possible with this building. But I think the quality of the windows that go in could have some influence on that.
And did the Design Commission recommend to the applicant that they pursue the historic designation?
It did come up. It came up at the pre-app, at the staff level. They said that they considered it. And Design Commission also noted again, independent of our considerations, that there are financial benefits, tax, rehabilitation tax credits that the owner could take advantage of if they restored the existing windows.
Yeah, and it was definitely stated that they truly believe, at least members of the commission, not necessarily all of them, truly believe the windows could be restored, could be, made more thermally, a better thermal level, but also restored. So that, I don't think there's a definite, answer to that, whether they could be restored or not.
And did they, in proposing the two conditions, was there discussion of whether they felt that with those conditions, it could be qualify as a historic designation and therefore qualify for the tax credits?
I think that the two dissenters firmly had concerns about that, and they were the ones who were, I'd say, the most concerned the whole way through the process.
I think that question was no longer part of the consideration because the owner said that it was a business decision to not move forward with listing. So, I mean, that's their choice. There's no further push on that.
Thank you for the clarification.
Commissioner Fish?
Well, Mayor, I just offer just a couple of points to hopefully salt the discussion. I really appreciate this hearing, and I appreciate the clarity of the presentations, and I personally do not want the council on a regular basis to be placed in the position of deciding these questions. And I am concerned that even though there is a right of appeal, that we become the body that makes what I consider to be very, very specific judgments that sort of are partially aesthetic and partially code and partially others. And that is the right, with the system is set up that way. I don't think we are the best equipped body. And I appreciate actually the testimony. I appreciated the comment earlier that we may want to revisit our process and have these kinds of things go to historic review. That makes sense to me. This is not like a case that we've had recently where there seemed to be a wholesale unwillingness to engage the Design Review Commission, so that doesn't apply. This does not seem like a case where the parties haven't made an effort to reach common ground. Clearly, there's work that's gone into getting to this proposal, even though reasonable people can disagree at this point. And for me, it is important that this is a building in a highly visible area off of a distinguished plaza. And so I think it's going to get some attention. But as I try to balance all this, Mayor and colleagues, and and I feel like this is one where I could almost flip a coin. And frankly, what tips the scale for me is I don't think we can compel someone to list their property as a condition of getting a tax credit. I don't want to be in the position of doing that. And I think cost should be, I think cost is a relevant factor. So on balance, and it's a very close call, I would be inclined to grant the appeal and deny the conditions.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So Commissioner Fish moves, Commissioner Saltzman seconds.
Pardon me, could I ask for a clarification?
Please.
The conditions that you're recommending striking, are they just the 2 bullets in question?
The 2 bullets in
Okay.
question. I think those are the ones that you said were before us. Good clarification, just those 2. Yeah, no, just the 2 in question, and as I said, it's a very close call.
Further discussion on the motion? So
I would
oh,
just,
please,
you know,
Commissioner
I would just
Saltzman.
echo the sentiment that Commissioner Fish just expressed. I feel extremely unqualified to be making these types of decisions about something that I cannot even detect a difference in, and takes me into a level of design detail that I am ill-equipped to have a constructive understanding, comprehension, or meaningful participation in. But I do understand that this has been before the Design Commission twice. It seems like come down to a very subjective level of detail, and I guess at some point, that's what we're asked to use here is our subjective best judgments. And in my best judgment, there's a lot of effort being put into this building to make it a vital building again and respect its history. And I just don't think that, and also I think the issue about having the risers or the dividers so the windows aren't even going to be fully open, I think those are things that make me support removing those 2 conditions of concern.
Commissioner Fritz?
Yeah, I guess I come and have the same concerns and would then come down on the opposite side of it, that since I don't consider myself an expert in this, I do consider the Design Commission experts, especially with the advice of staff, that I would tend to defer to their opinion, because the approval criteria say we must approve land use applications if they can be approved, or if the approval criteria are met, or if they can be met with appropriate conditions. And I respect that the Design Commission tried very hard to get to yes after the initial no, to then put in the conditions that they believe would be merited, would improve the project. So I, as my colleagues on the left feel like they don't have the information to go against the appeal, I feel I don't really have the information to go against the Design Commission. But it is a close call.
So I'll chime in as well. First of all, I want to again thank the members of the Design Review Commission and state again clearly they are volunteers, and they are dedicating a lot of their time and their energy and their expertise to that effort. And I'm very appreciative of that, and I want to be very clear. This case, I think, Commissioner Fish, you nailed it when you said you don't want to regularly be in a position of having to make decisions about a 4% difference in light, or the muntins and the dividers and all that. It's a lot to take in one hearing and make what ultimately is something of a subjective decision. And we have that expertise on design review, and we have that expertise elsewhere to make those decisions. And it sounds like there was some division there as well. And I am making my decision, I want to be very clear, based on that narrow question of the conditions. So I want to be clear. That being said, I also want to acknowledge, unless the attorney stops me and tells me I shouldn't say these things, I also heard during the testimony that this has been a 2-year-long process. And we have an organization that wants to restore this incredible asset in the community, and it seems like we're really, really close to the yes on this, although there are some honest disagreements about the window treatment. And I am persuaded that the right thing to do here is let them go forth with their project. I think they've made a good faith effort. It sounds like they've been responsive. They addressed the questions here very well. So I would support Commissioner Fish's motion based on that. But, you know, I agree. I actually like the fact everybody seemed to agree that for those on the historic list, it would make sense for them to go to the commission rather than design review. I think that's actually a great suggestion worth pursuing.
And by the way, I want to acknowledge, if I could, just what Commissioner Fritz said, because if I was channeling my inner Vera Katz, what I would say is, I want the commission to decide these things, so I will deny every appeal that comes forward to force the parties to work it out. So I appreciate and respect the logic of that. And, but for me, it comes down to the fact that it is 6 of one, half dozen of the other, and I can't find a path forward to go beyond what they've done.
Well, you know, weirdly enough, for me, it's pretty clear cut. I mean, based on the issues that have been brought forth to us, and I'm sure I'll regret having said this tomorrow based on my email inbox, but these don't strike me as the big issues. The big issue is whether, you know, and I've heard people previously say, the objective here with design review is to make sure bad buildings don't get built. And even as I weigh the two alternatives here, I'm not seeing a whole lot of difference that at least I as a layman see, particularly if the windows aren't going to open. I was actually really intrigued by the argument when I saw that the windows swing fully out, but if they're not even going to swing fully out, to me that lessens the strength of that argument in opposition to the appeal. So, you know, I actually think it's pretty clear cut from my perspective.
I need the
Commissioner Daly?
city attorney to repeat the actual question that we are being asked. Just the question.
The question you're being asked is whether to uphold or deny the appeal based on whether you think those two conditions are necessary to satisfy the design review approval criteria. Is that what you're
Okay,
asking?
I thought you had said something slightly more restrictive than that, but, okay.
And I'm going to note, and that you're in deliberation, so this is at the mayor's discretion, but it is my understanding that the opening of the windows being limited is not something that was discussed down at Design Commission either. So.
Fair enough. That doesn't change my view specifically with regard to the muttons, the dividers, or the clarity issue, for the record. Without further ado, call the roll.
Fish?
I want to thank everybody for.
I'm going to interrupt again. I'm sorry. Oops. The findings that you have are for a decision that includes the criteria. So today, I am assuming you are making a tentative decision, and we'll come back with findings, and after you've voted, we'll figure out when that happens.
Very good. Thank you for the clarification. Please call the roll.
Fish?
We are so lucky to have Carla and Lindley in our chambers on a regular basis. Thank you both, ladies. I want to thank everybody that took the time today to come and testify and present the facts and the arguments. I particularly want to thank a member of the Design Review Commission for taking the time. I don't know how she balances the rest of her life, because she's often here providing context and her expertise on these issues. And that's going above and beyond, Julie, and it was very much appreciated up here and noted. This is a close call, and I think reasonable people could disagree about the outcome, but I believe this is the sensible path forward, and I appreciate the process that led us to here. Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Daly?
This is also a close call for me. I mean, what I would personally like to see happen to the building is different than what I think is necessarily reasonable to require. I agree, I'd like to see these buildings go before the historic review. I'm gonna vote aye with some reservation, but aye.
Fritz?
Well, I still love land use hearings, even when I'm on the downside of the vote, because by definition, they are discretionary decisions when reasonable people can disagree, and they do. And so I really want to thank everybody who came to the appeal hearing today and for the principled way that the pros and cons were discussed, once again, looking at the actual project and the pros and cons rather than any kind of aspersions of one side or the other. In some measure, I'm going to do my no vote to show in the record that it wasn't a straight up and down slam dunk, and that I do continue to value the Design Review Commission. Since the vote has now already been made, I can say that I also have experience in my own home where I have just discovered I have a muntin on my front door. I thought it was a wooden lattice, and it's only on one side, and it would look very different if it was on both sides. So I shall go home and tell my daughter, look at the nice muntin we have right here. In fact, we didn't know what it was when we bought the house. It was in a cupboard, and I was like, I think that's supposed to go on the front door. So I do appreciate that these are economic issues as well as aesthetic, and I very much appreciate the fact that the lovely old building is being kept, restored, and put to another 100 years of good use. Thank you very much. No.
Wheeler.
I think it's all been said. Thank you all for being here. It was a great hearing. I learned a lot. I'm going to vote in support of the motion, so the motion passes 4-1.
We'll schedule a time to come back.
And we will schedule a time to come back, and we'll just have to look at the schedule to figure out the time to
So
do
under
that.
our code, the prevailing party, if the appellant wins and they are represented, can prepare the findings and come back. I don't know if that is your intent to have your representative draft the findings, so staff would work with Peter. How much time does the appellant think they need to prepare revised findings?
3 weeks?
It has to be within 120 days, is that correct?
I think we have a good amount of time till,
It's really up to them to decide how much time they need, isn't it?
July 21st. So if we do, 3 weeks is typical, that would mean that, meaning you would get the findings to staff within 2 weeks. Okay, so Carla, do we have a time in 3 weeks for a final vote?
Would be the May 31st. The mayor's gone.
That's
I
okay.
think that would be
As long as we
okay.
have as long as we have a quorum.
And if it's necessary for me to change my vote in order to have the vote at that day, I'm glad to do that.
That's just a simple majority vote, correct?
Yeah, but it has to be 3.
Do we need a
Have to have
time
3,
certain?
and these are the ultimate
Yeah.
in pro forma.
But it could be a morning time certain since it's just findings,
Boy,
either
it's
morning or
pretty packed.
afternoon.
Just one second.
Does it have to be time certain, council?
It does. Sorry.
I'm going to give that spot. Let's go with the 10:20 on May 31st.
I'm sorry, what was the time?
10:20 a.m.
10:20 a.m. All right, great. So this hearing is closed, or technically, is this a continuation, legal counsel?
It's a continuation, but it's just, we're setting it over to May 31st, 10:20 for a final vote.
Okay,
and
very
adoption
good.
of findings.
So May 31st, 10:20 a.m. will be the final vote on this subject. Thank you all for attending. We are adjourned.